My name is 𝐒𝐚𝐬, and this is Over Time. At this point, we believe that there is a distinct possibility that the Israeli government is in the process of collapse, or is imminent. A collapse of at least the government of Israel is imminent. It's really been an extraordinary. And I don't know how loud that. You know what? I may. If that background sound is too loud, let me know. I can mute it. So you can hear the protests. I'm going to mute that for now. Hopefully that worked. Just because I think it's going to be distracting. So what do we have? As you know, and we've been following this for some time now, the government has been in turmoil. Netanyahu has been attempting major power grabs and has been described as essentially becoming a dictator and trying to take over the entire state of Israel. The last remaining, or the only remaining opposition that I'm aware of, was the head of the defense minister. He has been pushing against what Netanyahu and his party on the hard right have been attempting to do, including attempting to rewrite the Constitution to give him dramatic powers if an emergency is declared. This was seen as sort of his final power grab. He was also attempting to reduce the power of judges to overturn his decisions. He did this in particular after the judiciary overrode a couple of actually overrode, I think, one cabinet ministry position that he had wanted. That again was looked like it was an attempt to coalesce power. At any rate, he has now fired the department, the defense minister, who was the last sort of remaining bulwark of moderatism in his administration, and the last one who was standing up to him and telling him he couldn't do these things. Upon hearing of that, the general counsel in New York for Israel has resigned in his resignation letter, which we will read presently. But essentially he said that he no longer had faith in the Israeli government and he could not represent that government. He thanked those in the boroughs and in adjoining states, such as New Jersey, for their help and how much he had appreciated working with them, but he no longer believed in the government of Israel and would no longer represent them. In addition, as of, about 4 hours ago, there was 500,000 people. As of an hour ago, there was 700,000 people protesting. There's now 800,000 people, averaging a gain of 100,000 people an hour. Roads have been blocked. There have been significant clashes with police. And a general strike has been ordered. It started with universities canceling classes, but now, in addition, hospitals are going on strike. The Israeli Defense Force has gone on high alert. It looks like he may try to deploy them. Now, in Israel, every citizen is required to have military service in the Israeli Defense Force. So to say that they would be firing on their own people is an understatement. Everybody there has served. I have no idea what would happen if he tried to deploy them, but there is some signs that he is planning on doing it. The rest of the country has declared a strike, and hospitals, universities, and labor workers have all announced that they will be striking starting immediately. And the U.S. government has issued a plea for both sides to enter immediate negotiations. I find that unlikely. Protesters have also gathered around his home in Jerusalem. We have some of the images down below. We are getting more. We're trying to find live feeds. Normally, we're successful in finding live feeds during a stream of this nature. We don't have any right now. I was going to say just as good. We've had people, unfortunately, suffer serious injuries on those streams, but that's kind of what we cover. So, at any rate, Jerusalem, all roads blocked. That's what we're hearing. You can see right there, that's the size of the protests right now. That is staggering. It is now 5 It is 5 a.m. in the morning in Tel Aviv. With me now is 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿, who was good enough to get most of the footage. Actually, let me be honest, he got all the footage that's down there. And Commander Lance McMillan. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'm going to go straight to you, Commander. What can you tell us about what's going on?
Okay, well, this one caught me totally by surprise. I'm not that up on current Israeli politics.
Wow.
So I had to do a little bit of quick research. I want to give everybody a sense of what's going on. So the first thing to understand is that Netanyahu, who's the current prime minister, is currently involved in an ongoing trial for corruption amidst all of this stuff going on. He is trying to force through legislation which will basically give him pretty much absolute control over all judicial appointments and make it harder for the courts to remove a leader who is deemed unfit for duty. Now remember, he's under trial for corruption. So basically, he's taken out and trying to take out an insurance policy that he can't be removed.
And the consensus just is, to the best of my understanding, that he is going to be found guilty. The consensus is he is guilty.
Oh, yeah.
There's very little doubt that he's guilty. He will be found guilty. So let's add that caveat. All right.
Right. So in addition to those measures that's going on, what brought this all to a head, as you noted, is the last member of his government, and this guy is also a member of the Likud party, like Netanyahu. So he's a member of Netanyahu's own political party. The guy's name is Yoav Gallant. He was the Minister of Defense. He has been dismissed by Netanyahu. Basically said, go away. Now, Gallant was, as you pointed out, kind of the last person in government within Likud who was arguing to mitigate against some of the stuff that's going on that Netanyahu is attempting to do. So his dismissal is basically Night of the Long Knives house clearing going on here. He's trying to get rid of anybody who can prevent him from remaining in power. That's why Gallant was removed. Gallant has support within the army, and specifically because he himself was an officer in the Army Reserve, he knows a lot of people in the Army Reserve, and he's been in communication with many of them who are expressing alarm over some of the other unrelated issues that are changes Netanyahu is proposing that will reduce the readiness of the military reserve. In other words, they were trying to make a larger professional standing army more important at the expense of the Army Reserve, or the Citizens Army.
Okay.
See where this is going.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please. I can guess where you're going with this, but unless that was a rhetorical question.
Right. So there's growing discontent within the military. It's to the point where there have been protests on various military stations. There are certain units that are simply refusing to follow orders anymore.
Jesus.
Let that sink in.
In Israel, by the way.
Yeah, no shit.
Also, to cut in really quick, I don't know if I sent you the particular video, but there's actually in the Tel Aviv protests, there were several chiefs of police that were marching with the protesters.
Yes. Yeah, this is not the opposition. This is a nationwide movement to get Netanyahu out before he basically ends up making himself dictator for life. So we have a near total government shutdown. We have dozens and dozens of resignations of high government officials. You alluded to the one about the guy who's the general counsel and not general counsel, but the consul general in New York City.
Yes, sir.
So it's like the number 2 ambassador, semi-ambassador in the U.S., Israel's. He has resigned. So the opposition party leader is a guy named Yair Lapid. He has called Gallant's dismissal, quote, a new low for Netanyahu. And then said, and this is important here, he then said, the prime minister is a threat to the security of the state of Israel.
Why is that statement in particular so important?
It's important because he's basically saying the guy needs to be removed by any means. Now, it's one thing that Gallant, who's a member of his party, has said that, you know, the guy's bad. But when the opposition party's calling it out, it's showing that the opposition now sees this as an opportunity to break Likud stranglehold on Israeli national politics.
In the U.S.,
oh
yes, please, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to finish up my notes here. The protesters started out with relatively small protests in front of Netanyahu's house, and as you noted, it kept growing and growing and growing, and it's getting close to 1 million people in the streets. They have a mob outside the Knesset. The government's basically shut down. The former head of Shin Bet, which is their equivalent of the CIA, there's a guy named Avi Dichter. He is going to be, or has been announced as the guy who's going to be replacing Gallant. What's interesting is he had come out earlier and said he agreed with Gallant and was considering resigning himself, but has apparently changed his mind. So he will be taking over the position of defense minister. And that's interesting. So my guess, being the political cynic I am, I think there was some sort of little quid pro quo deal negotiated under a table behind a locked door between Benny and Avi here. And the last bit I found just before we went online was something that we were saying. Netanyahu has announced he is, quote, considering, unquote, halting judicial reform acts for now amid pressure.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to cut it in this case. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if he'd done that like a day or two ago, maybe, but I think things progressed beyond the point where conciliatory gestures are going to fix things.
Especially ones that are like, well, for now, while you have a gun to my head, I'm going to stop doing this, but take the gun away, and oh, dear Lord.
Yeah.
So, clear and present danger is a term that has specific meaning in the U.S. It sounds kind of like that's what they were talking about. Is that roughly what? I mean, it sounds like it's basically a call to the military, too, to defend your country by removing Prime Minister Netanyahu. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think this would be the equivalent of, I'm trying to put it in context that Americans might understand, but let's assume that the movement, the protesters on the 6th of January seized the government and started rounding up Democrats and maybe even executing them or something. And then a whole bunch of government officials, including several that have been appointed by the orange shit given, said, no, everybody needs to get out in the streets, act now. We need to take this guy down before it's too late. That's kind of, in my mind, what's going on in Israel right
now. Also, a quick update.
Yes,
about an hour ago, protesters broke through the barricades around Benjamin Netanyahu's house and have stormed his house. They were evacuated, apparently to safety.
Netanyahu's family, you mean, was evacuated to safety?
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Interesting times.
Yeah, so great. I'm going to need a second here. All right. So it sounds like his home has now been overrun. The defenses to his home have been overrun. At least that's what it sounds like. If you got a link
I have
to that,
video of it.
Oh, right, perfect. Yeah, just DM me that, and I will get that in the bottom here. So what we're seeing now is an increase of about 100,000 protesters an hour. The entire country appears to be shut down. There's a general strike. That includes hospitals. That includes universities. Laborers. It appears to include everything. The roads in and out everywhere appear to be barricaded. Police have been engaging. We have smoke grenades or tear gas, water cannons being used, but that I can tell not in huge numbers. That's just going on what I'm seeing. We do have some reports that the police appear to be sympathetic to the cause. What we're looking at now is the opposition party essentially saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to be removed at all costs. Netanyahu has agreed, I guess, ostensibly to not do his removal of the judicial review immediately as a conciliatory note. I really don't think that's going to cut it at this point. We also have we believe there was a meeting between... Please.
I just looked this up. This is interesting. The numbers that are being spoken of for right now is they're between 700,000 to 800,000 as of an hour or two ago in the streets protesting. The total population of Israel is only a little over 9 million. So basically 10%, 1 in 10 people in Israel is out in the streets protesting right now. This is huge.
Yeah, there's some background noise. Apologize. We can't do much about that. It's on Macmillan's end, but he's been very good about muting when he's not talking, which we appreciate. So, and we're going to put up with it. I will say, there's something about, and I've got a couple. Yeah, this is okay. This is changing rapidly. I called up the commander and just said we're about to go live. It looks like the state of Israel is about to collapse, and he's just like, yeah. All right. So
the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, he came out and officially stated that Israel's in the gravest danger since the Six-Day War in 1967. That's a quote.
From who?
The former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett.
All right, so okay. Remember that because I'll probably end up forgetting that one. We also have the current president of Israel who's come out and said that this is essentially what he believes is on the verge of constitutional collapse of Israel. So obviously this is unbelievable and extraordinary.
It only took 3% of the people in the United States to overthrow the British control. So we got 10%, nearly 10% of Israelis out protesting. So that ought to be interesting in the Chinese sense of the word.
And I apologize. I've been following Ukraine so much. We've been letting some of this go by the wayside. So we do apologize because we've been following it, and we've mentioned it on occasion in a rundown. I knew Netanyahu was causing trouble. Nobody, I think, expected it to pop off tonight the way it did. But the new law basically removed a significant power from the Supreme Court to commit judicial oversight, in particular, I think, of his appointments, but also a number of the laws that he could pass. And one of the proposed laws was essentially going to give him emergency powers that couldn't really be revoked without judicial oversight, which he was also stripping. That's if memory serves. It's been a little while since we've looked at that. But just to hit from the top,
where have we heard the expression activist judges before? That's his complaint. That's why he has to have these things put in place so that he can deal with activist judges in Israel's high courts.
So let me ask you this while I've got you on, then I'm going to do another rundown. We would like to try to assume sort of at least every half hour, just do a rundown of what we know and try to, like 5 minutes, just go through it. But before we do that, so Commander, obviously one option is that Netanyahu resigns. Another option, I suppose, would be that he attempts to deploy the military in his defense. And a third possible outcome, I suppose, is that the military ousts him. Are there any other possibilities? Does that sound like roughly the three possibilities we're looking at? And can you tell me what each would look like, what we can, how likely you think each may be, given your experience in this area?
Netanyahu resigning. Good question. It effectively puts him in a bind because he's already on trial, likely to be found guilty, and I'm sure he doesn't relish the idea of spending a considerable period of the rest of his life in prison, which is probably where he'd end up, particularly after this. So he will resist that, I suspect. If he does go, technically Likud is still the majority party, assuming they can hold together their coalition. And I can't imagine it would dissolve. So you would just have somebody else replacing him from the Likud. But I think 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴nt is trying to position himself as a likely successor, which is smart politics on his part, I have to admit. Military coup, I really don't know. Israel is too young a country to really say how the military is going to react. In some countries, there are well-established traditions, even in some countries, laws that require the military to act in situations like this to restore peace. I don't know. I do know that if 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴NT's statements are correct, that there is already a lot of dissatisfaction with Netanyahu in the military, particularly in the reserves, that you might well see armed personnel turning up to support the crowd. I hope that doesn't happen because that'll get ugly real quick.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what else to add to that.
Is there any possibility 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴NT is going to attempt to seize power himself? And let's just to be maximum charity, and I don't think it's a stretch given what we know about the guy, but nonetheless, we'll make the maximal charity assumption, which is in order to oust Netanyahu and then restore power to the people. Is there a chance you think he will actually get the military behind him and move on Netanyahu and anybody who decides to defend him and or support him?
Given the way things are going, I think that would be foolish on his part. I mean, right now, his image with the public is probably as high as it's ever been in terms of, here's the guy who was the last person we held as our chance of having a sane adult in the room, and he's removed. The last thing he wants to do is suddenly make himself look like he's a guy who's trying a power grab, because that suddenly throws legitimacy back on the table for Netanyahu, because I'm the sitting prime minister and this guy's staging a coup to oust me. Everybody should rally to my cause. Yeah, he's far better disposed if he just sits aside and lets the situation play out the way it's going right now.
All right, so for those of you just joining us, it's been an extraordinary night in Israel. It started, I believe, around 7 or 8 hours ago. It started with the ousting of the Israeli Prime Minister 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴NT. He was the defense minister. I said prime minister. I apologize. Defense minister. He was sort of the last bulwark against Netanyahu as he was trying to cut the power of their Supreme Court and cut the power of their judiciary for multiple purposes. One, to insulate himself against a current charges of fraud and a trial of fraud, which looks like not fraud. Is it I'm sorry. What was it? It was corruption. Corruption charges that on which he looks like he is probably going to be found guilty. Also, it was in order to allow him to expand his power without judicial review, ostensibly just in cases of emergency. At least one of the acts was an emergency act, but several others actually expanded his powers to expand the cabinet without judicial review or oversight after they had blocked one of his cabinet choices. After ousting the defense minister. Protests started, and looks like it started around his home. Protests grew rapidly. They grew to about 500,000, 500,000 people. As of a couple of hours ago, we found it was 600,000, then 700,000. Now, at last report, 800,000, gaining about 100,000 an hour. They overran the defenses at his home, and it looks like they have taken his home. They've Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's family has been evacuated. His home has been overrun. At this point, the opposition party has they've called Netanyahu a threat to the state of Israel and are calling for his removal essentially by any means necessary. This means now that the Prime Minister of Israel is facing really an overwhelming number of his own people who are apparently willing to do just about anything to get him out. I would like to discuss the Israeli military in a minute, because their military is somewhat different than most other militaries that in the West that we're used to. They are in many ways much more of a people's military than we may be used to. At any rate, right now it looks like the military supports the people perhaps more than him, so he's got a very serious problem. We don't know where he is. We do know that the president of Israel has come out and said that this is a constitutional collapse of the state of Israel. And the Israeli intelligence services, we believe, had a meeting with Netanyahu earlier today saying that if he does not resign, they were looking at a potential collapse of the entire country. That is what we're looking at. I do think a resignation is highly unlikely. I agree with you, Commander. I don't think he's got anything to lose at this point. He's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. He's going to be found guilty on the corruption charges. If people are talking about killing him actively on the streets, entire political parties are talking about killing him. He will never get out of jail after this, I suspect. So it doesn't really cost him anything to continue going. It's very much the situation we find Putin in. All right. Thank you very much. Good to see everyone who's come here. It's obviously an extraordinary situation. That is now the Israeli intelligence services, the current president and the former prime minister. I'm sorry, Xander, what was it the former prime minister said about this?
I should have put a pin in that stupid thing, and now I got to go back. It's going to take me a minute to find it again.
All right. It's
Bennett. His last name's Bennett. I can't remember his first name.
I think it's crystal clear at this point that if he does not resign, Israel is facing an extraordinarily deep crisis going forward, and it's hard to imagine how they can proceed. They will not be able to function with him as prime minister. There's been a general strike now ordered going forward. Hospitals are not running. Universities are not running. Labor has stopped. I assume this means electrical is going to stop. You would hope not, because it's the people who need the electricity most of all is those who are protesting. But we will see. There's been some police actions so far, as you can see, and we've shown some police actions, but there's far fewer police out than there are protesters. So
according to this, the Israeli Defense Forces spokesman stated that the IDF has raised the military's readiness to its highest level in response to the governmental loss of control of the country, end quote.
All right. Commander, any thoughts on that?
If I were a betting man, I'd say that's opening the door towards coup. I don't think it's a coup that would be just the military launching it. I think they will approach judicial and legislative authority to try to get some backing to squash this before it gets completely out of hand. I don't think they'll want to act unilaterally. That's a very dangerous and bad precedent. But yeah, That's the kind of language you use when you say you better solve this, or we may be forced to solve it for you.
All right. So basically, a governmental loss of control. Yeah, meaning that they will. I'm essentially saying that if the government doesn't find a way to regain control, they will step in and take control one way or another. Ostensibly, is what's all right. So, all right.
The former prime minister was Naftali Bennett.
All right. And
the greatest danger since the Yom Kippur War or the 100 Days War, 1967.
All right, so
6-Day War.
Yeah, that's
I was there for that.
Did I just say 100-day war? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm looking at like 5 different things.
I didn't catch it either. I was like, it's because there is a 100-day war that lasted. Was that 7 years? I forget how long the 100-day war lasted. Anyways, but yeah, there was a yeah, I didn't catch that either. Well, that's all right. I was getting ready for this, and my wife has taken to just. She really wants to know. She can tell when I'm going to breaking news, and she's just like, okay. She goes, whenever you got that look on your face, and whenever you're running through the house, like, trying to get stuff done, she's like, something's going on. So she just said, just 30 seconds. I want to know, because she likes being the first one to know. And I said, it looks like the state of Israel is on the verge of collapse. 700 million people are protesting. And she's just like, that doesn't seem right. I was like, yeah, 700 million people are protesting. Goes, do they have that?
What's a zero among friends?
Well, I was just like, wow, I've suddenly turned into Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was just, oh dear Lord. So, yeah, we're all. There's a tremendous amount of information that we're all trying to collate. I'd like to also take a moment to thank our mods for showing up in force. We've done streams like this before, and it can get contentious. Obviously, people on different sides, show up and so on and so forth. So I want to thank everyone for all hands on deck for this one. This was obviously something we were going to cover live. I'd also like to thank Commander McMillan, who just basically, just called up and said, by the way, what are you doing tonight? So thank you very much.
Would you like me to murder another name?
Yes, please.
Former Israeli Air Force Commander Ben Eliyahu. I don't know how to pronounce this first. These are some interesting names.
ETN would be Etan.
Yeah. Etan. Okay. Etan Ben Eliyahu. Netanyahu declared civil war. That's a quote. Apparently, that was tweeted by him.
All right. Well, so what we're going to do, I'm going to ask a couple other questions. We're going to try to collate some more information, get more into the feed. This may be a long night, folks. It's now, I want to say about 5:30 in Tel Aviv, if I have that correct. And we're going to go through a couple of different things here. You can also join us on the Discord. We've been following this for the last 8 hours on the Discord, but it finally just got to the point where it's like, yeah, there's no... We need to be live with this. We're just watching it blossom. And there have been protests before in Israel for a while. But, I'm very proud of the work we do here. I'm very proud of the people that we can bring on. And somebody pointed out that this isn't anywhere on mainstream news, and that is what In Time exists for. I'm delighted that we're able to carry that. This is, in my view, extraordinary news. I'm surprised it's not live on every network show in the U.S., but it is where it is. Thank you all very much for your support and for being here, and we will do our best to honor that by giving you the best coverage we can. Join us on the Discord, and we've been tracking it for a while, and you really want to stay up on the news. Our Discord is the place to do it. So, having said that, I would like to do the following. I'm going to need about 3 minutes here with something, and during that time, I'm aware most of you are familiar with Commander Lance McMillan, who joins us to help us out, in particular with coverage of the Ukraine war. He's been a tremendous asset for that and comes in on any military issues, of which this was definitely one. Commander, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. I'm a graduate of the Naval War College, retired naval officer. Also graduate Staff and Command College, a fully certified what's called a Joint Services Officer. Was in the Navy for 25 years. Not much more to add to that from my background.
And
I will say that I lived in Egypt in 1967, which was the 6-Day War, not the 100-Day War.
Fine, be that way. I wanted it to be 100 days long. Okay, leave me alone.
Well,
I am trying to translate Hebrew as well, because there's a lot of crap being posted, and like most of these quotes are coming out from the Hebrew. I'm having to try and translate. I have another quote, by the way, from somebody who sounds
The Hebrew word for 100 and for 6 are very similar, I'm sure. Yes, please.
I'm sure they are.
Please, Xander, go. Would love to hear a quote if you're still on speaking terms with me.
There was 100 Days War.
I'm hoping 𝐒𝐤𝐜𝐿 is the name of this person. It's getting confused, so I can't figure out which one of these people is the actual former IDF Deputy Chief of Staff. But he, quote, "I call on all representatives of Israel in embassies around the world to resign immediately. Do not serve an illegitimate government." End quote.
But it won't even attack someone.
All right, we've already had the resignation.
He's the former defense minister, the guy whose firing precipitated all this.
All right, sorry, Xander. Who was it who gave that? Could you give the quote again and the name if you can? I have similar difficulties.
Well, it's the parts that I've got that were in English, and then I'm trying to translate the actual Hebrew here to figure out which one of these names is correct, because somebody's reporting it, and then I'm not sure if... Anyway, the former IDF Deputy Chief of Staff, quote, "I call on all representatives of Israel in embassies around the world to resign immediately. Do not serve an illegitimate government," end quote. I believe that is 𝐒𝐤𝐿, but that might be the person who is reporting that. So
Golan, not Golan. Okay.
Golan,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Golan may have been the former. So he was the defense minister as the position he got fired from. But
𝐿AN.
All right, maybe they're. I don't know why they're referring to him as the former chief of. But that may all. He may have either helped
the Air Force, I think.
Yeah, that maybe he came up through. I don't know. But I mean, we already have had resignations. We had in New York a resignation. In fact, let me get that. So, and then the okay. So the president of Israel, and I apologize. We're going quickly here. So 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻 Herzog, I believe I got that one right, but I get the easy ones. We give Xandering that, so we divvy up the who has to give which quotes based on. Xandering gets all the hard ones, I get all the easy ones. It's beautiful. Xandering Herzog said that the judicial shakeup had been called it appalling, and that and he said that the country of Israel is, quote, on the brink of constitutional and social collapse. We will all lose. The state of Israel will lose. The representative.
I would like to point out really quick.
Go for it. That
my last name isn't what you said it was, and I didn't say that. So could you give the name again? Because you said 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿, or whatever the last name was.
𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐿. Oh dear Lord, no, it was 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻 Herzog.
Okay. You said 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻.
Did I say 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻?
Or at least that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
We'll go back and look at the tape. Somebody go back and look at the tape. Exonerate me. If I actually said 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻, $50 if you report that I said 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐻. It's that simple. It's great. All right.
Yeah. Sorry, maybe I'm mistaken. I'm reading.
This is what editing is for. We'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post. We're going live.
Okay.
We're going live. God damn it! All right. All right. Quote, "Dear friends, it is with a heavy heart that I write you today to inform you of my resignation as General Counsel, as Consul General of Israel in New York. For the past 18 months, it has been my greatest honor and privilege to serve as Israel's representative to New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Delaware, and to build bridges of friendship between Israel and the United States. The political situation in Israel has reached a critical point, and I feel a deep sense of responsibility and moral obligation to stand up for what is right and to fight for the democratic values I hold dear. Today's dangerous decision to fire the Minister of Defense convinced me that I can no longer continue representing this government. I believe increasingly I have become increasingly concerned with the politics of the new government and in particular the judicial reform it is leading. I believe this reform undermines the very foundation of our democratic system and threatens the rule of law in our country. This is a pivotal moment in Israel's history, and while my time as consulate has been fulfilling and rewarding, I believe it is now time for me to take action and join the fight for Israel's future alongside fellow citizens as we work together to build a better, more just, and more equal Israel. He goes on to say that this is not a repudiation of the people of Israel, but rather the government. So, yeah, that happened. All right, so... Dear Lord. And I'm getting messages faster than, so thank you. We'll get to that. Thank you. All right. So, and we do have images. Okay. We've got images of the overrunning of Netanyahu's house. Let me just see they broke down the barriers. That may actually already be in the, no, you know what? That's it. This is it right here. I think this is one picture of it. I think there's another. But that looks like that's the same spot. Nope, that may be a different one. All right.
Get back to this. Where are we at? There we are. There's yours. Okay. Oh, too late. I might have actually sent that one to you already. I can't remember if I did or not. But they overran all the barricades blocking off the streets in front of his house, and they tore it down and took off down the street. You don't get to actually see them get to the house itself. They'd already apparently evacuated everybody from the house when that happened, before that happened.
All right. So all the labor unions have jointly agreed to strike. All the universities, hospitals are closed. So Dawn is going to be breaking there shortly if it hasn't already broken. It's going to be an interesting day, I think. Dear Lord. Let's see. So, okay, that is, yeah, we've got a bit more footage. I will inline that when I have a minute. I'll probably do another rundown. It's also worth checking the live chat. I apologize. Things have been a little hectic. All right.
I've got too many things open. I'm sorry. I'm not looking at the live chat.
No, don't worry about the live chat. I'd much rather. You've been doing a great job sending me stuff, which I really appreciate. And if there's something serious in the live chat, Titan, let me know. Other than that, our job really is to just keep this going as much as possible. I'm just going to check the live chat anyway. For it's just I keep saying, I'm going to check the okay, Labor Party leader. Yep. All right. Thank you, Brigwin. All right. Yeah, I think we're also going to need a bit of a breather here. It's been since we decided to go live. It's been running like a bat out of hell for most of us since this started. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I said this about the mods. CF Beauty and Dick Dawson are here. Mowdy was here. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And Dick's been awfully effusive, which I sincerely appreciate. I also saw somebody was talking about charity for Ukraine. We do have a charity that we're going to be doing that we've been planning on, and we're going to talk about more about that. I think probably on Tuesday. We've settled sort of how we're going to do it and what we're going to do. I'm very excited about it. Right now I'm kind of in war mode, so I'm more excited than it would appear right now. I'm genuinely looking forward to it, and Godless Granny sort of came up with the idea and has donated a really nice flag that she handmade, and I'm going to see if we can get Starsky's help and a few other people. I've already talked to Dick, and he's been very helpful about helping us with this. I think it's going to be a nice thing. and we'll be able to do some good stuff for charity. So, but we're gonna I'm gonna notify the Discord about that, and we're also going to mention that on one of the upcoming streams. So if the more extraordinary, and I normally have my pad out and I'll write down the extraordinary comments, but I can think of two. I just can't remember quite what they were. One was of the opposition party leader that essentially was saying, no, and that seemed to, I'll check that in a second. The opposition leader basically seemed to be saying remove Netanyahu by all means necessary. And then, what was the other statement? There was another statement I wanted to, I've forgotten. What I'm going to do is start writing these down. You'd think that would be, that would have been my first thing. I will do that. So, Commander, have you found anything new that we should know about? And B, what was the statement? I think you had found it rather shocking coming from the was it the opposition or was it the same party? No, it's the opposition.
Yeah, when he said the Prime Minister is a threat to the security of the State of Israel, and calling the dismissal of the Defense Minister a new low for Netanyahu. To me, those are indications that the opposition feels it's time to start really pushing this. I mean, if you were going to want to try to hold a general election so that your party would change the majorities within the Knesset, now would be the time to do it, because I think 𝐓𝐢𝐦𝐞 has basically allowed Netanyahu to burn all its bridges at this point. So I can see why they're pushing hard on trying to make sure this happens.
Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's a head of state president of Israel. Yeah, the president has basically called this a social and constitutional crisis, and had urged Netanyahu to pull back from this. He's been urging several times, but he published a letter I think about a month ago urging him to pull back, and then said earlier today that this was a crisis. Oh, we have a troll, I guess, in the live chat. 420 atheist, clearly unhinged, doesn't know what he's talking about, and we need to make sure he gets taken care of, especially before his Xander checks out the live chat. We'll get that taken care of. All right. So, let's see where we stand here. Bregwin is saying that there is a report that the IDF has refused to deploy, at least a few reports. So we haven't been able to confirm anything yet. That would probably comport with, I think, your assessment of what was likely to happen at this point, is that the IDF would probably support the defense minister, and they didn't appear like they were interested in deploying on behalf of the government based on that phrase, based on the quote, what they had said earlier. So at this point, we're looking at dawn in Tel Aviv. What are you looking for as a good indicator of what's going to happen next? What are your concerns, and what do you think?
Asking me?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I should. Yes.
Oh. I think as it transitions into daylight, I think more people are likely to turn out. Let's be honest, if you were turning out at midnight and continuing your protest into, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, you're a pretty dedicated individual who's really closely following politics and really feels strongly about this. As it starts to roll into a regular working day, particularly if there's a national general strike in force, which we believe has been declared, there are going to be a lot of people with nothing to do today who are going to probably swing out into the streets in addition to these motivated people. So you could well end up with a crowd of 2 million people
And you said 9 million total in the state?
Yep. So, somewhere in the vicinity of 25% of the population turning out and saying, hey ho, Bibi has to go.
You're Palestine right now, and you see this is going on. What do you do?
That's a really good question.
That, by the way, I will point out that was actually not mine. That was Aunt Jer. I think Bregwin posted a follow up on that, but that was I wish I could take credit for it, but that's a really good question. Yeah.
I can see it playing two ways. I think it would be dangerous if they tried to do something to interfere with what's going on, because most Israelis would immediately see that as an enemy trying to take advantage of them in a period of crisis. It's the homeowners association showing up and yelling at you to mow your lawn while the house is burning down. Yeah, you're not going to take well to that little bit. So
I will confess, I've never heard of Palestine referred to as the homeowners association, but I do get the analogy.
Yeah, I'm just looking for an analogy. I didn't mean to imply.
I'm busting your balls just because it was so.
We won't go into that area of politics. I have enough enemies in the world. Thank you very much. But I will say that the smart move, I think, for them is to really do nothing. And in fact, perhaps even go so far as to, talk to the other party and say, what can we do to help diffuse this situation, or at least keep things calm between our two countries as you sort this matter out. So you're seen as the good guy as opposed to the bad guy. I mean, I don't see how getting active benefits the Palestinians any, other than just pissing off more Israelis, which is never a good thing to do.
This may get into nuance of Israeli government, which that's a pretty nuanced field. But what happens, do you think? Netanyahu's removed. Who replaces him, and how is that decided?
Well, until the alignment of parties establishes a coalition that doesn't include the Likud. Likud's coalition will be the governing force, and they will be the largest party within that coalition. Unless you can somehow manage to strip away some of the parties that are aligned with Likud in that coalition and get them to line up with the opposition. I think the key is that none of that is likely to change until such time as there's another general election. So I think Likud's going to stay in party, and the way things are falling out right now, my guess would be that 𝐒𝐤𝐻 looks like he's in a great position to rise to the top here. He may well be the next prime minister once this gets sorted out.
All right, Xandering, you've been following this for a little while. What are your thoughts on what you've been seeing and how you've been watching this grow and where we stand right now? By the way, they did check in the live chat and they confirmed that I did not say your name.
Yeah, that's exactly what it said in the live chat. Yeah.
Well, you said you couldn't check the live chat. Wait a minute. Wait. You said you couldn't.
I opened it up and had to go take a peek because you were claiming some troll by 604 atheist somebody or another.
I'm sure it was a typo. I don't,
Yes, I'm sure 3 different people made typos.
Speaking of revolutions. All right. So you were saying. Well, not yet, because I interrupted you before you had a chance.
Don't make me come back there with a belt.
Sorry.
No, I just did one of the weird little things that it's like I stopped driving. I'm in Little America, Wyoming. There's not a whole lot to do in Little America, Wyoming. So I started just looking through the different news feeds that I follow on Twitter. And I was like, oh, look, they're protesting again in Israel. It's like, didn't they do this yesterday too? And got to looking at it and started looking more and more and started watching the video. And it was like, wow, this thing is growing and growing. And an hour later, I'm like, okay, now there's like 600,000 people out there, and it's like midnight, and they're still growing. Then at 3 a.m., it's like, wow, now they're deciding to put out the mounted police, and it's like, this thing isn't slowing down; it's getting bigger. And then looking at some of the different aerial pictures and just watching the crowds grow, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of people. I mean, they're literally filling the entire highways and city blocks.
Well, to put this in context, if this were America, this would be something like 2.5 million people all across the country protesting at the same time.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty.
That would definitely get your notice.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. And so I'm sitting there watching all the videos of all the people gathering together and just how many people there were. And then, they started showing some of the police clashes as the police were trying to gain control and clear out some of the highways and stuff. And that's when, Nick sends me, hey, you should check out Breaking News. So I was like, well, I mean, unless it's more interesting than the, hundreds or tens of thousands of people. Yeah. Unless it's more interesting than the tens of thousands of people protesting in Israel right now, I don't think I'm going to bother.
Well, you and I were
so
trading
I went
memes.
And looked really quick.
You and I were trading memes, so I figured it was just like, I figured if you were watching it, I'd been like, oh, by the way, have you checked out Israel recently? Oh.
Well, I mean, when I was looking at, I was kind of sucked into the actual videos of the building protest because it's a little bit behind. What's actually going on right now. So I was a little behind as I started looking through there, and I was checking out the whole For You page. And so yeah, I was sending you some of the memes from some of the stuff that kept popping up, going, wow, some of these things are starting to get pretty brutal. And then going back and watching some more video, and then I would go back and it's like, okay, that video's done. And then I go back and there was one guy I was following, he was like posting updates. And he was there live. He was actually filming it, and then he would post the updates. Unfortunately, they seem to come about an hour late. By the time they actually upload and I get a notification that he's uploaded a new video, it seems like it's an hour old already. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was bouncing back and forth. And then I started seeing, it's like he's like, look at this in Breaking News. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, so the last several things have been about what's going on in Israel. So I just did a general search for Israel on the trending thing. And that's when I started seeing a lot of the quotes and talking about how many people have actually there. And I was like, got a little bit more context of why this was going on. I mean, I knew that from all of the different posts that they were concerned about Netanyahu having fired the defense minister, but I didn't realize it had gone quite as deep as it had until I started looking that up. And in the meantime, you're like frantically already running around going, we're going to go live. Ah!
Yeah,
I just
with my hair on fire. Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that probably is a pretty good thing to go live with. I mean, I'm just sitting here casually watching, literally hundreds of thousands of people protest in Israel thinking, that's pretty impressive to get that many people. I mean, that's an impressive number of people. And those are some big crowds. And meanwhile, you're going, this is probably breaking news and we should probably, cover this. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I help you with a news channel that does, focuses on things like this. Yeah, we probably should do that. Here's some video.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you dumped a whole bunch of video, which has been very helpful. We've got a question in the live chat. I'll get to that in a second. We've covered it ad nauseum. Well, not ad nauseum, quite a bit in the beginning, and we're going to have to keep covering it again. This is This is why this is on the rundown. We're just going to do rundown after rundown after rundown. So the let's see. Oh no, I forgot. Oh, there was that other question. Yeah, 420 or 604. Yeah, well, if that was yeah, it was actually 420. But if you have enough 420, you're going to be 604 anyway. So what can you do? And then another, yeah. So it looks like Reuters is finally carrying it. It's been too long since we beat all the major networks to something big, and this is going to be a good one. So far as the news goes. So where do we stand? Your title says brink of collapse. Yeah, so that was the words used by the president of Israel. He said that they were on the brink of a social and constitutional collapse. What that looks like is a good question. I can toss that back to Commander McMillan in a second. We've gone over some of the options, but at a minimum, we believe Netanyahu is going to be removed. So the government in that sense, in terms of how a government is formed by a parliamentary system, is going to be forcibly removed by power. It also looks like there's possibly a coup in the works right now. So whether this turns out to be a coup, the removal of the current government, or a revolution, we don't know yet. And I think all are on the table, although McMillan had, I think, some ideas as to what was more likely than not. But let's pass that on to you. What do you think a collapse would look like at this point? And just as well, I'll ask you that question first, and I've got one more after you.
Yeah, I think the word collapse is a very poor choice of word because people probably think it means something other than what was intended when the president of Israel said it. And I think what we're looking at is he means the governmental system is on the brink of collapse because Netanyahu is doing everything he can to remain in power, even though it's obvious he has completely lost any real support within the Israeli electorate. I think that's what he's talking about. And when you get to a situation like that, it's collapse in terms of you have to kind of end up going back and rewriting your constitution, redefining what constitutes your nation as a state, and making sure something like this doesn't happen again. It doesn't mean that Israel disappears from the map and, I don't know, Palestine annexes it all or something. That nobody's saying that's on the verge of happening.
But certainly then at least a sort of a governmental collapse, and at least some form of reshaping of the government as it's been structured.
Yes. So I suspect what'll happen, as I said earlier, is I think somehow they're going to sort this out. Bibi will be politely asked to exit stage left. How polite that is, and how much physical force is used in executing that removal, I can't really say. But once he's gone, then they have to figure out, well, how do we get back to having a government? I mean, do we allow Likud to remain in power and they choose a new guy to be a replacement prime minister? But then with this, big a change in how people see the Likud party, perhaps we should order immediate general elections to readdress the problems. Do we need to rewrite the Constitution so it provides for a removal without force of a leader who has lost touch with the people, who has lost popular support with the people? All that has to be decided. That's the kind of crisis we're talking about.
I do think it's fair. I think that's, we need to, let's update that so we don't have confusion. So I'm going to say Israeli government on brink of collapse. I think it's probably, let's update.
I think that's a better choice.
Thank you. So thank you. I think let's do that. We're going to do that. Sometimes these things are also, they're written very quickly, with very little time before we go live. Normally, too, it's a rush to beat mainstream news. Sometimes we're ahead of them by minutes. So far, other than Reuters, we appear to be ahead by hours. All right.
Mainstream media is like, that isn't really a big deal.
That's we've been in this situation a handful of times, more than 5, less than 10, where we have something big, and we're the only ones carrying it, and it's almost like I feel like I'm being gaslit by every other news organization on the planet. I was just like, why am I the only one who thinks that this is worth streaming on? Okay, let me. I think what I may do is gotta switch.
At least in the U.S.
It's not a big deal until it is a big deal.
Yeah. What were you saying, Henry?
It was like countries.
Oh, is Andrew, you there?
Oh, it's like countries.
I'm switching over to the discreets, but it looks like who else is Andrew doing that?
I can hear him.
You can hear him? Oh, there you go. Is Andrew there?
Lost.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I couldn't hear him for a minute. I think, I switched over to the discreet.
I'm found?
Just call him
like a regular gospel song.
back.
All right, hold on a second. I'm going to update the title real quick. While I do that, so it is time to play our favorite game, Torture Commander Macmillan. Commander Macmillan is it's my favorite game in the world. He is very cognizant of the fact that he does not know everything, and he doesn't like being asked questions to which he doesn't already know the answers. So he's bringing in his backup. That's what is that? What's right below a commander? I don't know, but we'll give him an honorary
Lieutenant
title.
Commander.
Lieutenant, perfect. So that's going to be our
Lieutenant Commander.
Yep, that will be our Lieutenant Commander going forward. I swear to God, that dog gets more. That dog gets more likes than I do.
Certainly more than I do.
Lame. That's to be expected. Come on.
Yeah, well, I don't have the fur or the cute face. One of the things that he does not like is being asked to speculate on things that he cannot possibly be expected to understand, which is why I like doing it so often. Commander, where do you think we'll be at this point? Wild guess, where will we be in 24 hours?
I think there will be some solution found within 24 hours. I don't think anybody in Israel wants this to continue past that. Will it be a definitive conclusion to it, or will it be one of those classic, let's postpone the decision and hope that it magically sorts itself out? I can't tell you that, but I suspect the latter. I think they will come up with some sort of, okay, I won't enact the judicial reform stuff, and perhaps I'll put Gallant back on the ticket as defense minister, and that will shut everybody up, and then we'll move ahead. I don't know if he can recover from the faux pas that got him here, and I personally doubt doing that will be enough. But if the rest of the government, particularly within Likud, is in a lot of ways, this is really a crisis within Likud more than it is anything else. If that's the case, then it might solve the problem, quasi-temporarily solve the problem. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, with a general strike now, countrywide, certainly it looks like something's going to have to be, there's going to have to be a concession or something made, because the country's not going to operate with the hospitals on strike, with all the laborers on strike. Every union in Israel is on strike, and the roads are blocked. They're not going to go that far. I agree with you. I don't think. Gee, my bad. Mistakes were made. Is gonna work at this point. I really don't. I think it sounds like, and when the head of the opposing party says that you're a threat to the country, I don't see going back to that. How I don't know much about that party. I used to, but it's been so long since I've looked at it.
Which one, Likud or the opposition?
Likud. So Likud is a plurality party. It's the largest party, but it doesn't have a majority, so it has to form a coalition. So unless unless everybody else against it turns, they're not. But I mean, yeah, please.
Likud tries to advertise itself as center-right. It's probably a little, yeah, exactly. It's probably a little further right than center-right. It's not ultra-Orthodox, ultra-nationalist, but that's the problem, is that for Likud to maintain a majority, it has to form a coalition, and traditionally the parties it has brought into that coalition are the extreme right, extreme religious groups that give it that. So in order to maintain that coalition, they need to keep giving little prizes and benefits to those extremists, which in some ways has pushed Likud further and further to the right, when I suspect there are a fair number of people within the party would prefer not to be moving in that direction. But if you want to be in power, that's what you have to do. And Netanyahu's only goal here has always been he wants to be in power. That's what's kind of going on. So if he is removed or at least hobbled and they bring somebody else in to replace him, there's still the issue that they have to work with those other extreme right parties to maintain that majority. Because if any of those parties break off, then you end up with the opposition taking control.
So basically what you're saying is that Republicans in the U.S. were co-opted by a minority that were vocal enough and had enough power to give them a credible shot at winning a majority, and so they made a deal with the devil and went further right than even most conservatives or Republicans would like in order to remain in power. I mean, Israel. Jesus, sorry. Did I just say?
Yeah, I was wondering where you're going this, but the analogy fits, so we'll just let it sit.
All right.
This is one of the
sounded a familiar story. Yes.
This is one of the instances where I actually have quite a lot of sympathy for parliamentary governments versus ours.
Do or do not. Do or do not. Sounds like you said didn't.
I do.
You do. Okay.
I do. Yeah, I do have sympathy for it because it does allow for the formations of several parties, and there can be some minority views that can actually get incorporated in it, and you at least get your views out there in the government. Whereas in the two-party system, that doesn't so much work.
Well, and that's yeah. Please, sorry. Oh, sorry. It sounded like Commander, you were going to say something. Did I?
No, I was just agreeing with you, or Sandra.
Sometimes it leads to bad things, like what we're seeing here. But I mean, so does our two-party system. So. I mean, there isn't a perfect system where that can't be abused or can't go wrong. So, but I think being able to put, actual minority type parties or smaller parties in government with some governmental representation, and that you may actually have to deal with and address some of their concerns and issues, oftentimes is, I think, better. At least gives a little bit better representation to the views in the government itself.
Well, I think we've had this discussion before, which is that when you have a system where any part of the government is winner take all, which is the presidency, and it wasn't supposed to be winner take all because the vice president went to the second place party. That was changed for what I think are very good reasons, but it had the consequence of it became a winner take all system. And the problem is, on a long enough time scale, that will always resolve to a two-party system. The brinksmanship and parties that are going to be removed because they can't credibly compete for the top place and they don't, no points for second best, And that makes everything in all three branches essentially this winner-take-all, and you have nothing but a two-party system, which I don't think you can run a country on a two-party system credibly long-term. We haven't been a two-party system for the majority of the country, but it's not. You have to have a third party, otherwise corruption becomes a heck of a lot easier. And people, I mean, the reason the Democrats do more paying lip service to LGBTQ and to gays, and I mean they've done some work. I don't want to sit there and say that they don't do it, but a lot of it is paying more lip service because it's like, well, where are you going to go? Are you going to become a Republican? Really? There's no credible third party to apply pressure to either of the other two, so it's a problem. So I think at this point we're going to do a quick rundown of what we have so far. It's been a lot. So about nine hours ago, we started getting word of growing protests in Israel. There have been protests for the last couple of months. Benjamin Netanyahu has been coalescing power around himself, and he's been removing obstructions to that power, including enacting or attempting to enact new legislation that would put severe limits on the judiciary, which was the only thing that kept him in check and forced him to be in line with their constitution. Without the judiciary, he would essentially be a dictator and could not be checked. He has been fought routinely by the judiciary and other elements of the government. Recently, the last remaining moderate holdout, the defense minister, was fired earlier today. He was the last moderate, the last one who had any ability to stand in Netanyahu's way. He was fired. Immediately after that, we've had a wave of action happening in Israel and in Israeli institutions across the world. We've had resignations. We've had a call for the resignation of anybody working in any embassy on behalf of this current government. We know the only confirmed one that we have, we've had a few unconfirmed reports of other resignations, but the only confirmed report is their counsel in New York has resigned, saying that he would not work for this government. We also had what started with, obviously, is just, smaller 100, 200,000, quickly grew to 500,000, 600,000. We've been gaining 100,000 people every hour. The last report that I have was from 2 hours ago. It was 800,000, having grown 100,000 each of the 3 previous hours. So that's big, as Commander McMillan pointed out, that they're a country of only 9 million. So proportionately, if you were in the United States, and he did the math on this, which I appreciate, this would be equivalent to 25 million people. I saw his eyes go up and check for the correction, so thank you. I appreciate that. 25 million people in the U.S. Marching. That would be the equivalent marching across the country. 25 million, that would be representative of what they're seeing now. There's been a call for a general strike. Hospitals, universities have said that they will be closed. Laborers will not work. Every union that I'm aware of, what I've heard was every union has issued orders for a strike. The protests have had some violence. What you see here is a water cannon being deployed on protesters, but overall, the amount of police presence and military presence has been reasonably small. Hold on, can you mute yourself unless there was something you wanted to add? All right, thank you. So the amount of, we have heard from the military who have said that the government has lost control, and that, I forget what the exact quote was. We'll get that in a minute. But that essentially that they were in acknowledgement of the fact that the government of Israel has lost control, and seemed to suggest that it get control fast. The opposition party essentially called for the removal of Netanyahu by any means necessary, saying that he was a threat to the country. We have the president of Israel claiming that this constitutes a social and constitutional collapse, potential, social, or he called it the brink of, that's actually where we got the quote was, said that they were on the brink of constitutional and social collapse of this country, and we believe there was a meeting. We were told that there was a meeting between Netanyahu and Israel's intelligence services saying that the government would collapse if he did not resign soon. He did not resign, and we are now looking at a military that everybody's watching to see what they're going to do. So far have indicated that they're quite aware that this is happening, but they're staying on the sidelines. We've had a few unconfirmed reports. And we'll talk about what's okay. Thank you. We'll talk about what constitutes a confirmed and unconfirmed report in a minute. But we've had unconfirmed reports that there have been some attempts to deploy the military against the people, and they have refused. This smacks a bit of a coup d'état. It would be a little unusual in some sense because it's closer to a revolution, but I'm not sure that it's a revolution either. This is pretty hard to categorize for me. The commander may do better than that. He had mentioned it sort of and it also depends on what the military does at this point. It looks like the military will not be supporting the prime minister. That's what it looks like. I said earlier we wanted to discuss the military. Israel is a small country and it is surrounded by other countries that want to wipe it off the face of the earth. Period. End of discussion. That's where they stand. Military service is required for every man and woman in the country. They all are members of the military at one point. They've all joined the military, gone through military training, and it is only through taking their own military and defense with the utmost seriousness has this country been able to survive in an extraordinarily hostile environment. That makes it... Xander, if you could mute, that would... All right, that makes it... a lot less likely that you will find a military that is willing to fire on the people. Now, the reservists tend to be closer to civilians than not, and it looks like Netanyahu was trying to eliminate the reserves and expand the primary forces. What makes this interesting is if the primary forces report exclusively to Netanyahu, which they might after firing the defense minister, that gives him his own army, and he's removed essentially the People's Army, which would be the reserves. So it looks like, and we've had reports of a lot of angst, to put it mildly, in the reserves about what he's been doing. We believe at this point that the defense minister, and it was his firing, he went basically through the ranks and is not thought of as a career politician. He has the respect of the people, so he may be the next in line. We don't know what's going to happen. There is no constitutional... I mean, in one sense, so the government has at this point collapsed. And what remains of it and what they can do is an interesting question, but they don't have any control. The military is not obeying instructions, and there's clearly no faith in the government as it stands. So the question is, can they replace him with somebody who at least temporarily can create enough order and has enough credibility that they can get stable again. But if there is no military, if the military won't do as the government commands, if everything is on strike, if the hospitals are closed, if businesses are closed, and if you have, what is it? What's the percentage right now? It's a significant percentage of the population. And we believe, keep in mind right now, this is nighttime. All of this started around 1 a.m. their time. 1 a.m. their time. A lot of people are asleep. When they wake up and find out that everything in the country has been shut down, those that at least oppose Netanyahu, which from what we can tell is the vast majority of them, are all going to take to the streets. This is nothing so far in terms of the size. Macmillan was saying he wouldn't be surprised if it reaches 2 million. That's out of a population of 9 million. This is going to be staggering. So the government in its current form is non-existent. What recovers or how... non-existent is probably hyperbole. It has collapsed. Nobody is credibly in charge right now. Netanyahu presumably is in charge, but if this looks like in charge to you, and again, he appears to have attempted to deploy the military and they have refused orders. In Israel, refusing an order from, I believe he's essentially the commander-in-chief. I could be wrong. I don't, that's beyond my ability, but he's the highest politician in the land. He's given them an order. Refusing it is staggering, which means The government no longer has military support. It doesn't have support of the people, and isn't functioning at this point. So it's essentially what appears to be a collapse of the government, and how it recovers and or responds going forward is, I think, what we're going to be talking about. So now that we've got Commander McMillan back, one of the things I wanted to ask about, and I've talked about this briefly, there's two things I wanted to talk about. First of all, you had mentioned the attempt to remove the reservists in place for expanding the main army, and I had suggested that was probably something that we should discuss and an issue of concern. And the second thing is the military in Israel is somewhat unique. It's everybody in Israel must serve. Every man and woman in Israel serves. This is because they are in an extraordinarily hostile environment, surrounded by countries that want to wipe them off the face of the planet, and can if they're not careful. Could you tell us a little bit about...
There are exceptions. So,
please.
It's supposed to be, unless you are an excluded group, all males must serve.
Like Hasidic Jews, I would assume, or something like that.
Right. And there are provisions for people who are conscientious or objectors or whatever. They're allowed to go and serve in, hospitals, that kind of stuff, do stuff that isn't directly military related. So that's allowed. And they have to do, I think it's 1.5 years, I think it's 18 months or maybe 15 months of military service as active duty, and then they are put into the reserves for X period of time, and then after that their service obligations done. So my understanding is what was going on is Netanyahu was talking about not removing the reservists, but making them less of a central focus, a central part of Israeli military operations. The idea that they would be more like the U.S., where the bulk of the actual, let's go out and kick somebody's ass, at least initially, is done by the active duty professional force, and reservists are called up only as an augmenting force to supplement the regular active duty force. That's kind of what he was talking about doing.
Okay. So, this is on Jer. Imagining Nick running around his house trying to put on his suit jacket with a cloud of paper. Yeah, that was actually really, it's like they couldn't see for part of it because but they saw I didn't have my coat on yet. And I was like, where's my coat? I'm like throwing things and like we're trying to go live. And oh, dear Lord. One of these days I'm going to have to thank Agrippa for saddling me with this coat because I can't do a show. Like, I no longer feel like it's a show if I'm not wearing it. All right. So, yeah. All right. Now, in my view, I mean, I don't know if the Prime Minister is considered the Commander-in-Chief. I assume he is, but I assume that there's somewhat more restrictions than there might be in the U.S. But if he's ordered them to deploy just defensively to, say, protect his home or protect, which, by the way, for those of you just joining us, we also know his home has now been overrun by protesters. I imagine there's probably nothing left of it. But I mean, overrunning the home of the Prime Minister too, I mean, is pretty frigging extraordinary. So, I mean, in the U.S., refusing an order, a direct order strikes is kind of a big deal. It feels like it's an even bigger deal in Israel, considering how serious. Okay, so I'm like, that's just me. I'm not an expert, but. So, yeah, that struck me as pretty. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I should
note, I've seen nothing that says that is widespread across the entire military. All I saw was a report that certain selected, almost exclusively reserve units had said that they were not going to obey certain orders pertaining to doing X. Kind of like they're going on strike is the best way to express it.
Well, that also happened. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if Israel were attacked by Syria right now, for example, yeah, I suspect the entire Israeli military machine would spring into action like it would normally do. And all of these reservists who were saying that, I'm not going to obey these illegal orders from Netanyahu would still show up.
And we've discussed, we've discussed the possible outcomes. I think we may get into that again in a minute. Well, that's a very good question, too. We've got some really good questions. Commander McMillan, do you believe that the Israeli military allies in the area are on a heightened state of alert? Yeah, I don't think they have allies in the area. I could be wrong. I mean, Egypt is not an enemy with them, but what is happening in the U.S. military?
Certainly not enemies. The closest one would be the U.S. Based on my personal experience, I would strongly suspect that the Ready Expeditionary Unit that's deployed in the Mediterranean usually is on full alert for a possible non-combatant evacuation out of Israel of American civilians if things went bad. They certainly haven't been set in to do anything, but when you see this kind of civil unrest developing, DOD acts preemptively to tell people, get ready in case we need to do X, Y, or Z. So they start their planning cycle now, and I would strongly suspect that's going on.
If Netanyahu seeks asylum in the U.S., I assume that creates one hell of a fucking problem.
You are an evil man. I don't like you anymore.
well, there's a long list there for that one.
You just came to that conclusion.
Oh my God!
Yes, Andrews are like, welcome to my hell, dude. I've been here for years.
What happens if Netanyahu applies for asylum in the U.S.? Oh my word! Well, I suspect that Trump and his extended family will be all a-quiver and excited over that little bit, but not sure Biden would be amenable unless it was a way to quickly put an end to this nonsense. In which case he might say yes. I don't know. I don't really know how it would play out.
It reminds me of
that is what we used to call a blivet.
A blivet?
Yes, 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound sack.
I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not. You know what? I'm going to take it as a compliment.
Pro tip: the sack usually splits open, and that shit ends up everywhere.
Shh, don't tell him now. Let him find out for himself.
Well, it just reminds me of I think it was it. I want to say it was Carter stuck with. Does he help the Shah come to the U.S. to get medical aid, knowing full well? And his advisor said, no, don't. And he did. And things have been interesting since. All right. So I think we're going to do another rundown. It's interesting. So, at least Reuters is now running with this. Reuters is awake. That's nice to see. Thank you very much. Titan's been passing the questions to me, which I appreciate. Things get a little hectic back here during this. Native Atheist, $10. Thank you very much for your support, Native Atheist. We appreciate it, especially on days like this. It's crazy for everybody, so we really appreciate it. What's going on with Israel? Let's do another rundown. I think it is Commander McMillan's first time on one of these. Zandring's been with us for more than a few. He's been with us for ones that have lasted like 10 hours. I don't think we're going to go on to that, but we may still have a long night ahead of us. Israel has been in a state of angst since Netanyahu has been making a number of major power grabs for the last 6 months or so. We've been talking about it. He had a decision that was overruled by a decision for for a cabinet position that was overruled by the judiciary, and I think it was actually their Supreme Court. His response to that was to attempt to essentially disband the Supreme Court and or pull all of its teeth. That failed, but he did try to pass legislation that would dramatically reduce their ability to override any decisions that he made. And ultimately, they're a little different than the U.S. Their Supreme Court is considered the ultimate arbiter of the Constitution, and if they're gone, there's no arbitration left. There's no way to keep that keep him in check in any way. So it looks like he's been essentially trying to become the dictator of Israel and essentially run the entire country. He's been getting closer and closer and closer. Yesterday, yesterday his I don't know the order. I think I got the order mixed up. So last night, depending on where you are here, but yesterday he fired the last remaining moderate holdout in his government. It was the defense minister. The defense minister enjoys huge support from the people. He fired the defense minister. His own intelligence agency said that this could result in basically, if he didn't resign after this, he could end up with a collapse of the government. The president came out and said that this represented essentially a constitutional collapse and a social collapse of the government, and protesters took to the streets rapidly. It started with obviously 100,000. All right, and I'm going to interrupt real quick. Andrew, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Go definitely sleep, because I want you to stay safe, and I know you got to drive. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrew, and thank you for all the help tonight.
Yeah, no problem. I hate to bail out. I do need to be driving.
Don't sleep.
I have to get up in 6 hours to drive. So
sleep well. You did a great job today. So sleep of angels. You did a great job, and I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Have fun. Have fun with your sack.
Have fun storming the castle. Oh, I've heard that this sack will just last forever. It's a Teflon sack. You can put like 30 pounds in there if you had to. That's what I've been told. It's like rubber, Teflon, like latex. It'll be fine. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. You just give it a try. Good night.
Come over to my house tomorrow in case I need help cleaning up. All right. Good night. So, protesters took to the streets in the hundreds of thousands. Pretty quickly, they had about 500,000, and they gained 100,000 an hour after that. Our last full report that we're confident in was about 3 hours ago. It was about 800,000 of them in the streets. Now, keep in mind, they only have 9 million, so that's about 10% of them. And the numbers, we believe, for reasons the commander here outlined earlier, are probably about to get much larger very quickly. But right now, that's about 10% of the population that are in the streets. The police were ordered to try to quell the protesters. We've got some footage of that, but that we can tell in some cases there's at least 3 police captains, we believe, that joined the protesters, and the police have not been taking much action. The barricades to Netanyahu's house were overrun. His family was evacuated, and his home has been overrun. We don't have footage of it. We don't know what it's, but I assume his home is, Benjamin Netanyahu's home has been destroyed. The opposition party has said that Netanyahu is a danger to the state of Israel and called for his removal essentially at any cost. So at this point, the opposition, I mean, that's obviously pretty stunning when an opposition party is essentially saying if he won't leave, kill him. The military has recognized that the government has lost control of the country and so far is staying out of it. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know what the rest of the government is going to do. We don't know where Netanyahu is right now, to the best of my knowledge. All right, Israel 12 live stream. Thank you. I'm going to check that out in a minute. That's it. One of the things is, and so let me explain. We got another super chat. We work very hard to beat mainstream media to any number of stories. We were the first organization that I'm aware of that was covering this. Certainly, we beat every mainstream media to this. I don't know why. I have some idea why on some stories. This one I'm a little baffled by. It certainly isn't the first time. We're very proud of that. And I know a lot of you have been supporting us. And we're very proud of the fact that we do this quite regularly, actually. Those of you who've been around for, some of you have been around since day one. And you've seen us do this repeatedly. And it also, by the way, couldn't happen without the people on our Discord who bring us this information. This gets into a question that was earlier about confirmed versus unconfirmed. How we do this is reasonably simple. Actually, information breaks fastest on social media. It gets on social media faster than ABC, CBS, anybody else gets it. It's on social media. Why? Because they're not everywhere, but somebody with a camera is just about everywhere. So we see it. We then decide how credible we find it, and that goes with anything to just watching the video and our experience in this, and or geolocation, trying to figure out what we can see in the video, whether we find it credible. And for something big like this, as evidence mounts pretty quickly, we decide it's credible. We've had unconfirmed reports that the military has been asked in some cases to try to quell the protesters, and they haven't done anything. What's an unconfirmed report? It's a report on Twitter by a source that we don't know. That's what that is. So, there are sources that we know, and if we hear it, we sit there and say, okay, we've pretty high confidence. We've heard this. We know who this person is. We know when they report things, it tends to be good. And we work hard on this. I'm going to just tell you one other thing, and this is one. I think the commander was with us for this one. We went live with the invasion of Ukraine hours before anybody else did. The way we did was we found on Facebook a video of a 7-mile-long column going from Crimea towards Ukraine. We looked at the footage, and instantly I had no doubt it was real. It looked real. It was a 7-mile-long column that somebody was driving along, and you could hear them in Russian going like, "Oh my God, here's this." And they're talking about the column. But nonetheless, we decided we had to try to confirm it before we could go live, but it was headed straight to Ukraine. We're like, okay, that's it. The invasion's starting. It's starting now. And then we got the idea, hey, wait a minute. Does Google Traffic work in Crimea? Turns out it does. And we checked on Google Traffic Live, and sure enough, there was a 7-mile-long slowdown in the area where that footage was recorded. That was confirmed. Went live with that, less than an hour live. All the footage on the Crimean border from the cameras all cut. And we knew. We were the only ones live with it. So very proud of the work we do, and it could not be done without people like Commander McMillan, who comes on and actually gives us some semblance of credibility, which shows you how desperate we are. Oh, come on. Well, good. He's working. So, okay. 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿𝐴𝐤𝐬, who comes on and always has extraordinarily important opinions to share. And I find them important because they often conflict with mine, and I think that's important. But he's a very honest interlocutor and genuinely cares about getting to the bottom of things, which is exactly what we need here. Also works because of the people on our Discord who gather the information for us and who make sure that I get it when I need it, and have just constantly telling me on the spot whenever something like this happens. And our head mod as well, Titan, who makes sure that there's always people there covering our asses. When I didn't realize that there were actually like Muslim Zionists, but it turns out there are. Don't ask how I know that. That was a long day. At any rate, so what I'm going to do here is quickly look at this. Eventually they'll show protests in all the cities. So yeah, what's going to happen here is right now, this started happening around 1 o'clock their time. So this is going to grow. We believe it is now past dawn there. It's almost 6 a.m. If I've got the math right, it's hard to... I only want to do the math once, having to do it again and again and again. It's just, why does the time have to keep changing? So I don't even know how old I am. I keep forgetting how old I am because it always changes. My age could stay the same, but at any rate, we believe that dawn is breaking, and we believe at that point millions will take to the streets. People who are asleep and had no idea. We know that there's a general strike at this point. Hospitals, universities, and all unions have called a strike and will not work until the situation is resolved. So the country has come to a grinding halt. The government is completely ineffectual and can get nothing done. The military is standing by and watching, from the best that we can tell. Netanyahu is facing multiple calls to resign. There have been calls for everybody at every embassy to resign, and anyone who works for the government to resign. We've only have been able to confirm one resignation. We have unconfirmed reports of other resignations. I read the resignation letter, at least part of it, earlier. I may do that again if time allows, but that is what we are facing. Basically a collapse of the government of Israel, at least in its present form. So our father in green asks Commander McMillan, is it possible that Israel could descend into civil war?
I don't think so. To have a civil war, you need two sides, and there really aren't two sides. There's Netanyahu standing alone, and everybody, including his own party, basically turning against him. And the issue is he currently has the legal authority that says he's in charge because he is the duly elected and appointed prime minister. But it's clear that he's in the process of losing, if not having lost that. And so it's having the reality catch up with the bureaucratic side of the problem that's going on here. I don't see it as civil war is likely. I think there may be some confusion, and there may be, certain security units that decide to overreact because they think that's within their mandate. But I don't see a civil war. I see perhaps a little violence, but nothing long-lasting.
This is a bit of an awkward. I mean, it's basically it's closer to a revolution. I don't think it's a revolution because they're not going to try to rewrite the Constitution or do anything like that. But it's closer to a revolution.
Oh, no. I think they may well try to rewrite the Constitution.
All right. I stand corrected. All right, so it's certainly closer to a revolution and or a coup d'etat, except a coup d'etat, well, it depends on what the military does, I suppose, but if the military joins the people, do you call that a coup d'etat? I need a call on the technical terminology.
Technically, that would be a coup, but I think what they're trying to do is all this protesting and everything is an effort to compel him to resign so that they don't have to overturn law and have a coup or a revolution or anything like that. That's what's going on, is people are trying to say, we want you gone, and the Constitution does not have the legal means for us to do that, sans violence. So either get out of the way or we may end up having to resort to that. We don't want to. I think that's what we're seeing here. This is as I said, 10% of the country is standing up and saying, F you, and he needs to stand down before it grows to a point where he really has no option.
All right, so sunrise has hit the west wall. So, yeah, it's 6:50 now. Thank you. So, what is that? 7 hours ahead? Yeah, that's 7 hours ahead from where I am. All right, so I'm going to check. I think I did miss a sticker. So that was Dr. Tapioca Weasel gifted 5 In Time Show memberships. That was awfully nice of you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So thank you. That's an interesting new thing that YouTube lets you do, and it was very generous of you. So thank you very much for that. And a native atheist. Okay, so I'm caught up with the super chat. So thank you guys very much for that. Commander, well, if you could mute, thank you. If you could mute for a second.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. It takes a lot of getting used to. I was actually quite impressed at how quickly you sort of picked up that habit, and I'm still not great at it. I'm just like, okay, I'd rather spend some extra money and get like really good hardware that it still doesn't work with chatting in the background, though. It just doesn't do it. But yeah. All right. So, welcome to In Time. We've been talking about what is the current state of Israel, and I think we're all kind of shocked. We knew there were difficulties. We knew Netanyahu was on his last legs. I think we knew he was going to probably get removed at some point, somehow. He fired the defense minister last night. This has changed everything in Israel. Now massive protests representing... Let's see. Okay, so I think the commander did the numbers. If this were the U.S., that would be 25 million people on the streets there. 25 million people if this was the U.S. As a percentage of the population, almost 10%. And it's nighttime. Dawn is just breaking over there. So that's a huge number of protests to just start in the middle of the night. We have every union has called for a strike. Hospitals, universities have all said they are on strike. They will not operate. My hope is that ER procedures are exceeding. I would assume that, but I don't know. And we have resignations coming across, at least one in New York, of the general counsel there, resigning, saying he will not represent this government going forward. Mixed reports of what the military is doing. At a minimum, it appears that they're not engaging in any way. So I think everybody can be thankful of that. So have I missed anything? Any thoughts as you look at this, Commander?
Not that we haven't covered already. I mean, I think what we need to do at this point is it's going to be a couple hours before we see anything dramatic happen. I think the crowd, as I mentioned earlier, is going to expand as people wake up. This protest started, my guess is around midnight-ish. And so this crowd that you're seeing in the photos that are rotating through or cycling through, those are the dedicated ones who felt it was important enough to get out of bed, miss a night's sleep on a work day. Remember, it's Monday now. They're out there protesting, and since it's roughly, what you said, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock now in the morning there?
Now 7, yep.
Yeah, people are going to be waking up with their normal cycle, and when they find out there's a general strike in effect, a lot of those people are going to say, well, I don't have to go to work. I'm going to get out there and protest as well. The risk, the danger here is when a crowd expands past a certain point, it's really dangerous because nobody's in control of that crowd. It kind of becomes its own entity. And yeah, a lot of violence could occur just because you get people who are bored, angry, what have you. And that's where the danger lies, is that this can get out of hand. There's one shot in the cycling video that you're showing towards the end where it looks like you got a crowd rushing up through a knockdown gate or something. I don't know if that's Netanyahu's house, but I look at it and two things stood out to me. One, how quickly that crowd was moving when it rushed in. And two, how, I don't want to say lethargic, but apathetic the security force response behind them was. They're not running up there to try to get them out of there. They're just kind of quietly walking up behind them. Okay, well, we're going to try to prevent you from doing anything seriously damaging. Don't set the building on fire. But yeah, it's interesting. That's all I can say at this point. It's really, yeah. I mean, you get all these burning tires and stuff that you see going on here. Yeah, this is a potentially very dangerous situation if something isn't done soon. And that's what I think the Army's statement was, which is that either get control of this or we're going to move in and take care of the problem ourselves. And nobody's going to like how we deal with it.
If you can find that statement again, I should have written it down, but if you can find that statement again, that would I'd love to hear that one again. 3 minutes until we see if News 12 has a live shot of Tel Aviv. Yeah, I'm going to check a couple of. Oh, and there was another news source I wanted to check, but I got distracted, so I'll get to that. Dataless Media, $5. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate it. I think this is more akin to England's Glorious Revolution, maybe. It may result in a redone constitution, but for sure they are trying to depose Beamy. I actually don't know much about the England's Glorious Revolution, so maybe you could tell me how those are related.
The Glorious Revolution?
Yeah, the Glorious Revolution strikes me as the Glorious Revolution was let's see, there was the Revolution of Dignity. There was I don't know which one's the Glorious Revolution.
Yeah, it's I'm going to get the year wrong. It's in the 1600s, I think, and it's when the last of the Stuart monarchs is deposed, and rather than having a civil war like you had the first time they removed one of them, and you got Cromwell as Lord Protector and everything. Basically, my understanding is Parliament gets together and say, okay, you guys are no longer fit to govern. Goodbye. We're going to find a replacement. And they bring in, I think it's William and Mary, if I remember correctly. And they're actually German, and that's where you get the line that starts progressing down to where we are with the British royal family today. They bring them in from overseas.
Ooh, I had missed this. I want to get this. There's an image I want to bring in. I'll be bringing this in a second. It.
Somebody 16. I can't really see. 1638, 1688. I can't tell. Anyway.
No, this is purported to be. See, this comes from. I have a hard time believing that this is legit. It doesn't look photoshopped, but I'm always concerned when I see images like this. It's a good one. This is a report of citizens who were streaming, and I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to find the source on this. Oh, he's a journalist. Okay. So a journalist said that they had taken this photo, at least a purported journalist. So let me put the photo in. I think you're going to appreciate it. Let me snag that real quick. So, and then the other question I wanted to ask you, you have studied military history. Tell me, in terms of historical events, how big does this seem to you?
It's not a military event, so not quite in my bailiwick, but
no,
but
fair.
Nonetheless, I think this is significant because one of the issues is that Israeli politics in the past, I would argue, 40 years, have kind of been dominated by a couple of extremist parties on the right, because it was the only way for the center-right party to ever form a government. And so they basically held them hostage. And I'm hoping that this might break that cycle and start bringing in more liberal and open-minded governments that can operate without having to cater to the extremists on the right. I think that's the key.
All right. Hold on. Let me. Okay, we do have I've got a live cam from Jerusalem, but that's not really showing me a whole heck of a lot. So this image, I love this image. I think it's a great image. We can't confirm its authenticity. It was put by a self-identified journalist. I don't know if he's a journalist or not. It looks great. I love this image. I said that this was being carried by protesters in the... I'm not sure who would have made this in time, but it's entirely possible. It looks good. I like it. I'm gonna I think I'm going to expand that.
But I like that, but it's, I think, pointing out one of the key things here is that there is increasingly a lot of authoritarian proto-fascist activity like this going on, where you get egomaniacal leaders, cult personality stuff, where they're trying to simply supplant and replace constitutional law to make themselves quasi-monarchs. You got Le Pen in France. The Germans, back last year, arrested 40 or 50 people that were plotting to try to overthrow the government violently. And they're all extreme right organizations that are trying to do this. And it's happening everywhere. And I just look at it and I wonder, what is the proximate cause that is making this all occur across the globe almost at the same time? And the only other time I can think of that you saw this kind of thing occurring was back in the 1930s, where you have this massive rise of fascist authoritarian regimes. You get Mussolini, you get Franco, you get Hitler, you get the ones that arise in South America. You have Mosby in England. They're the blue shirts in Ireland. The U.S. has both the Klan and the German-American Bund. You have fascists in Japan at the time. All of this going on in the 1930s. And then it just kind of, at the end of the World War II, it stops. And you wonder, what's the proximate cause that's having a resurgence of all this going on right now? Uh-oh, Nick has gone quiet. That means I have to carry the conversation. I'm talking to myself. Let's see. I'll try to read some of these comments. Let's see. Let's see. 90-year cycle of stupidity. Yeah, I love that.
Apologies for my abs. So you did great.
That's okay.
This is going to be the Commander McMillan show. We're gonna, almost. Thank you for I had to go get the dog.
The globe descends into chaos, and each time it gets worse. Yeah, I have to agree with that. 1918 pandemic saw a resurgence of worker load move. Yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna grab it.
Yep. So that's an interesting comment from Brannigan. I'm sure I mispronounced that. Anyway, the idea of the 1918 influenza pandemic has parallels with the COVID pandemic that we're going through, creating labor shortages, and that causes an opening for authoritarian movements to move into that, taking advantage of it.
No.
It's an interesting thought. I like it.
All right.
Sorry, the guests are leaving and the dogs are agitated, so I'm going to mute for a bit.
Go for it. I will. Yeah, I'll see if I can answer some of these questions too. And good questions. We'll answer questions for about 10 more minutes. We're going to do another rundown, then we'll figure out how we're going to approach the rest of the night. We have some decisions to make. So we'll talk about it. And
thank you. All right. Hopefully that has resolved the echo. There we go. Yep, thank you. All right. I'll wait until we can confirm that the echo has been resolved. Apologies for perfect. Thank you. So I love this headset. It's a very nice headset. Lets me go about 300 yards, which I really like. I have to walk on occasion. I need to walk. I have nerve damage. If I don't walk, I can get myself in trouble. And the dog barked, and I thought this was working, and it was not. So we had the Commander Lance McMillan hour for about 30 seconds. Thank you for that. You covered. You started reading the live chat. That was beautiful. I appreciate it. It's been my experience. So I was talking about it. I was like, yeah, I was talking about it. Nobody heard me. I was talking. I was just, nobody could hear me. Especially the rise of the far right in the U.S. The Supreme Court's been an interesting study in this because in some ways they're worse and in some cases they're better than Trump. They're better because they do believe in the rule of law, and they're perfectly happy to throw Trump under the bus if he's doing something really inanely stupid, which is most of the time. So they're not actually allies of Trump, despite both being on the far right. Having said that, they're worse because they're far more willing to stick to far right ideology. I think Trump just goes where the wind takes them. Whoever's got the most money in their pockets that's talking to him is the person who's going to determine where he's going. That's been the conservatives, and that's going to continue to stay that way. But I don't think he really has any love for that. It reminds me of that when he said to the NRA, you guys got to do something about guns because these guns are a problem and we got to get these guns off the street. And then an hour later, you tell somebody had a conversation with him because it's not the NRA's fault. And the problem isn't the guns, obviously. Somebody asked him, how could you just said an hour ago. And he's just like, well, that's not what I meant in context. It's like, oh, dear Lord. So
what the president meant to say was.
But I've been thinking about, I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that this Supreme Court has overturned huge swaths of 60 to 80 years of progressive gains in this country and is poised to overturn almost all of the progressive gains in 80 years. And you take a look and you say, well, how could that happen? And some of it was very crafty, plotting by the conservatives. Mitch McConnell was far more successful, I think, than even he had anticipated. And in denying Obama his judicial pick and any number of other things that led to it. Some of it was luck. A lot of it was planning and just knowing what to do with the luck when he got it. Having said all that, they all got into power somehow and were able to do this. And I think I've looked at wave patterns. I love wave patterns because I think wave patterns describe things in nature much better than we give them credit for. And you can see, if you add a whole bunch of wave patterns together that are oscillating slightly differently, and they all are not in phase, and then suddenly they just, by random luck, line up and something happens. So it's almost like what is believed to cause rogue waves.
Rogue wave.
Yeah, you look at a couple of things.
Oh, trust me, I've lived through a couple of them.
I'm going to have to ask you about that. I'm going to remember that one. You have unparalleled success of liberals over the last 80 years and a growing resentment and fear of that. You also have a growing resentment and fear to education and growing complacency from success in the U.S. and a growing ideal that the U.S. cannot be defeated and never will be, which is, I think the commander will agree, the first ingredient in being defeated. We have sort of reached the point where we can do no wrong, and that's become very dangerous and has allowed people who feed into that and who say, yeah, the U.S. can do no wrong, and anyone who questions it. So you get that coupled with a genuine distrust of intellectuals and people who think and think well. A genuine, and by the way, some of that, by the way, being, I remember when I saw Boehner on the House floor shouting, "Oh no, you can't pass this healthcare, you can't." And I'm sitting there going I know that isn't for his fellow congressmen. Yeah, I know that isn't. I was like, this is him standing up, getting the votes. I was like, but he thinks this is going to work. And I think he's right. I think this is going to really propel him. I think people are going to say he really speaks for the people, which means if it does, he has correctly read the rage on the right, because that was a stunning speech. And I was like, okay, that means they're angry. What are they angry about? Not so much the passage of healthcare, but by liberals who said, we're going to pass this whether you like it or not. We're going to do it in, a way that was a little sneaky. And we're doing it because we know what's better for you than you do. Which, by the way, I'm kind of inclined to think we did in that case. But telling people that and operating at that level, you're too stupid to know what's good for you, so we're going to pass it. And I think liberals were getting a little full of themselves from all this success, and we're starting to think that, it was always going to be liberal successes, and we were ordained to win. And I think that empowered the right. So then you get a phase, a coalescing of all of these separate things happening at the same time, and they all lined up to really propel the right into power as not even the best. So many people who voted for Trump knew he was full of shit and a liar, but he pissed off the left. That was his qualification. And I think
that was all that mattered.
Bingo. And I think if you really did see our democracy as fragile, you wouldn't have put that over everything else. But they did. Why did they do it? Partly the left's fault. I'm not going to say it's blaming the victim to say it's the left's fault for Trump. The conservatives who chose to do it. But I understand their anger and their rage because, the left can really be like, we know better than you what's good for you. We're going to tell you and you're going to do it our way. That would piss me off.
Yeah, but at the same time, I would also say that, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it again, going back to wave theory, and this one was the idea that we're now entering the fourth wave, as he used to call it. I want to say touring, but I know it's not touring. So, but the idea is that there were major shifts in human civilized development, and as each one of those came upon us, it caused enormous upheaval, and you always inevitably got pushback. So when you transition from a horse-drawn economy to a steam-driven economy with the railroads, the disruption that caused to all the people who had vested interest in horse-drawn economy caused upheaval and problems. And at the same time, because laws take time to catch up with reality, the people who were the ones that were producing, developing, financing the railroads made ungodly amounts of money. And then finally, legislation caught up and said, okay, well, you can't do that because every time you do, there's a 70% chance the train's going to explode and kill X number of people. So we would prefer that you use X kind of metal in manufacturing the tubes in your boilers, and things like that. And we're doing the same sort of thing right now because we're in that transition phase from the analog to the digital economy. And so there are people that are making huge rafts of money, and other people whose entire livelihood is being destroyed as we make that transition. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of the people that are moving to the right because they see their livelihood being destroyed. They're willing to accept the response from anyone that I will save you, I will correct things, I will bring it back to the days of yore when you were comfortably assured that your old technology, your old style of doing business worked. That's one of the reasons that appeal is there. And you'll notice that almost none of the people that are big on the right ever come up with a solution. They simply point at the other, those lefties are doing this and it's going to hurt you. Well, how would you fix it? Oh, but it's their fault. You see what I'm getting at? So
I do.
That's the appeal. Is you all you have to do is say, I understand your plight. I feel your pain and suffering. I will solve it. And I think that's one of the attractions that's going on. And we're in a period of change, both from analog to digital. We've also got climate change that's now having profound effects across the globe. Population. I don't think the world really can support as huge a population as we've got right now. We just crossed 8 billion, and go back 100 years. Where was it? I think we were still under 2.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's been insane.
Yeah.
I think, I want to say 100 years ago, just at the start of that boom, there were more people alive on the planet than had lived in human history. Now I think it's about 100 and I think it's, let's see, we've had about 110 billion live through history. So there was a point right at the start of that curve where it was just like, okay, sort of like there are more than there are more lawyers in law school than actually practicing law. We were at that point with the human population, but
yes.
I to tell you the truth, I was guilty of this too, because one of the things that happened, so coal was a great example of what you're talking about. When Trump came out and said, I'm going to bring back the coal jobs. And I would tell supporters of Trump, he's lying. And, or maybe he's not lying. I mean, in order to lie, you have to know that what you're saying is false, or at least believe what you're saying is false. And I'm like, he may believe that he can do that. He can't. Here are all the reasons it cannot be done. It will never happen. These are the reasons why. I started to go over it, and they don't care, right? They don't care. And they certainly don't like a liberal telling them that the guy that they're voting for. So more of them are going to go vote for Trump. The more you sit there and tell them that he's utterly full of shit. And he is. It's demonstrable. And, you've got all these, how many lies has he told? I mean, I think he, what was it? Was it factcheck.org or somebody just estimated how many lies he had told in his first year, and he exceeded every other president in like 2 administrations. It was just...
I loved it when they were doing fact checks of him when he was doing State of the Union addresses.
Oh, God.
And they're not doing deep research. They're just, as he says it, and you look, oh yeah, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. It was like every other sentence was a lie. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, he said so he just had a rally, I think it was last night, maybe it was earlier today. I'm starting to get a little tired and punchy. Yeah, and first of all, it was a huge rally. It was absolutely huge. It almost filled a quarter of the space that was set aside for it. It was breathtaking. But he filled in, he just took a white marker and just put it and he filled in the rest. So there were plenty of people. But let's see, at that rally, he said things like, I was the first president to put tariffs on China. Oh.
Magic Sharpie that changes weather patterns.
Yeah, it was the same Sharpie. I love that Sharpie. I think we should have that Sharpie on as a... Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I'm probably gonna be a naughty boy. I'm gonna do something here in a minute. Hold on. Oh, I've got a few. I may do this if I can find it. There's a meme that I want to put up. It came out earlier. I almost retweeted it. I decided not to. It was a little aggressive. I'm gonna see if I can find it. But at this point, oh God, Twitter keeps changing the way it does everything. I can barely navigate Twitter anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can find this thing, and I'm already not optimistic. It's looking, and still, well, at least some news organizations appear to be picking this up. So I suppose that's decent. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another rundown. Yeah, we do repeat ourselves a lot in these shows just because, people keep joining us. You never know when somebody's going to come on. And so I'm going to do another rundown for all the new people who have joined us. Okay, I can't find this meme. I'm going to go another. It was a picture of, it said it was a picture of a Trump rally. and it was commenting on how big the audience was and all of these other things. And it was a picture I've never seen before, and they're rare. It's rare to find a picture I've never seen before, from inside a rather large German hall with all these Nazi banners with Hitler just out there speaking. And I was just like, whoa, that's no subtlety there. I don't, and then he's gonna, I don't know what happens when he gets indicted. That's actually, we're going to have to go to standby because I think indictment may be... Oh, do not read the live chat.
Are you serious that there's indication that the indictment's about to hit?
I think, well, I'll tell you, we'll talk about the indictment in a minute. Daedalus Media, $2. Use the Sharpie to pick the Israeli Prime Minister. Oh. I think we do need a gag where it's
just draw a Likud banner symbol on that building there, and everything will be fine now.
I would love to see Trump on a live stream. He decides he's gonna break out the Sharpie and he draws on the camera. It's like, okay, this is how you. There you go. Like, oh, how do we wipe that off? It's like, you do it on the camera too. All right, so let's quickly talk about the indictment. We've covered the indictment pretty significantly, so here's what we know. There's 4 grand juries out on him right now. 4. The one that he has the least to worry about, which is why we're glad it's first, and we hope it's first, is going to be the indictment on the Stormy Daniels issue. Now, it is actually questionable whether he broke the law on that one. I'm not convinced he did. I don't think it's a huge stretch. He clearly intended to do something he shouldn't be doing, but it's arguable. He listed as legal services, not bribing Stormy. That's not right. That is not correct. Giving Stormy Daniels
I thought the key issue was where the money came from. Not so much that he paid her hush money, but that he was using election donations, which you cannot use for something like that.
You would think that would be the issue. That should be the issue. That is the one they could have gotten him on, but that is prosecuted at the federal level, and the federal government declined to prosecute that. So even though I believe he's guilty of that, they declined 2 years ago to prosecute it. Now, they could still do it. The statute of limitations has not expired, but it would look like Biden has sent them the message, hey, go after him now, because they'd already declined to do it. I looked at the evidence on that one, and it is crystal clear he violated election laws. I have zero doubt on my mind. But since the Department of Justice declined to prosecute, and they came out with a memorandum, this was about 2 years ago, we will not prosecute this. It's done. You're not going to go out. They better not go. I don't want them to go after him on that, because that's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. That one they had him dead to rights on. The one they don't have him dead to rights on is lying on a federal or not a federal form. I think it was on a New York form. It wasn't his taxes, but it was a declaration of where his money was going to or coming from or whatever. And he has $100,000 that he calls legal expenses. Well, that's the money that went to Stormy Daniels. Now, that is not bribery. That is not illegal. It's not illegal because you can make deals like that. People sign NDAs all the time and are given plenty of money to keep shut about something that they know about. So even though it seems like it should be illegal, it's not. But you put that down under usually something other than legal. Now, sometimes it's legal. If you're Coca-Cola and part of your day-to-day business is paying people not to sell the recipe, and you take them to court and you have settlements, you might be able to say all the settlements fall under legal expenses. The problem is this wasn't a settlement, and just because it was done by his lawyer doesn't really mean it was legal. But it might under a layman's definition. So I don't think you could meet a criminal burden of proof. I think you might be able to meet a civil burden of proof. I don't think he's going to get it. I do think you can indict. That's what they're trying to do now. It is the state of New York indicting him for lying about what that money was used for and saying that it was legal expenses when it wasn't. All right. The jury, I don't even know if the jury has now gone out on that. They may have.
That seems like a real stretch.
I think it's a stretch, but it doesn't have to be a stretch. It has to be basically it's probable cause to believe a crime has been committed just to get the indictment. That's where they lead to you could indict a ham sandwich. I think he's going to make the indictment. I hope he does, because if he doesn't, it's going to make it even harder to indict him going forward. You need someone to successfully indict him, and that's the hole in the dam, and everything else falls. I think he can make it, and he seems to think he can make it.
What's Brink?
At some point, it's going to go to the jury. Last I heard, they had 2 witnesses left. It was Tuesday, and they were going to finish up Tuesday, and then it's just deliberations. When they complete the deliberations, it's rare that they do this, but they do for some bigger cases. They lose, for lack of better terminology, the jury's verdict for a period of time. So what they'll do is they'll say, "Oh, we just got the verdict in, but it's Friday, and it's either too late we don't want to read it now," which they do all the time. Or even on a Thursday, they'll say, "Oh, we got a couple big cases tomorrow. Let's wait until Monday." And they deliberately schedule things in the way of reading the verdict. And they do that so they can read the verdict at an ideal time. Monday is a better time than on a Friday, because on a Friday, everybody says, "Well, I was going to go out drinking with my buddies, but now I'm going to protest." And they have the whole weekend clear, and they can go out and they can cause trouble. So they try not to things that are likely to incite violence. They don't do on a Friday. They save it for a Monday, because now, and late Monday. So Monday, last order of business, 5 p.m. will be to read the verdict, if they have it. I don't know if they have it yet, but if they have it, they'll read it on Monday, last order of business, so that it doesn't even filter out to people until dinner time. You've just had dinner. You're sitting with your family, and then you find out that Trump has been indicted, and you're pissed, but you just sat down and opened the beer. It's going to dramatically reduce. It really works on reducing the number of people who go to protests. So if they can, they wait until a Monday evening to release these things. So I don't know if the jury has come back yet. If they have, they may just decide to read it right away, but they haven't read it yet. But if I was going to read it, I'd do it on Monday. There's a decent chance that the jury's come back and they're just sitting on it till Monday, and then Monday they read it. So was Trump supposed to get arrested last Tuesday? No. He thought he was going to get arrested on Tuesday, and the reason was because the New York Times did the math and figured out that Tuesday would be the soonest he could be indicted. So they wrote an article saying Tuesday's the soonest Trump could possibly be indicted, because it can't go to the jury before then. It cannot go to the jury before Tuesday. It can by Tuesday. So if it's a slam dunk for them, they'll indict him Tuesday. Otherwise, it's going to take however many days of deliberation. Trump saw that and said, "I'm going to be indicted Tuesday." And he went to Truth Social and told everyone he was going to be indicted Tuesday, caused this firestorm. It turns out, big shock, he can't fucking read. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. Here's the thing. I told everybody that I was stunned, because it turns out, and people were trying to figure out where he got this, and he finally admitted he got it from a New York Times article. He was reading the New York Times. He was reading the New York Times. Yeah, he was reading. I mean, I was stunned. So anyway.
They have a coloring book section, right?
Oh, there you go. That's it. It was the coloring section of the New York Times. Oh, dear. So, yeah, so that's it. There is, I would estimate no more than a 30% chance the indictment is going to come down tomorrow. The only way it could come down tomorrow is if they've already had it and they're sitting on it till tomorrow, and or if it just comes down naturally tomorrow. If it doesn't, they'd be happy to release it on a Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe on a Thursday. I don't think they'll release it on a Friday. I think if it comes down on Friday, they'll push it to next week. So we're not in standby on this, but we're aware that the indictment could come down. I tried. Oh God, I tried. I tried to be professional with the thumbnail. I've got a picture of Trump going, hey, it's like Trump indicted, and but I was just like, no, that's not professional. Like him with a grimace or a sad little pouty face is okay, but we're not going to do I was just like, I'm trying to keep that sort of inner, like, or just do a cartoon of him like behind bars, holding on to the bar, it's like, no. I'd like to, but no. All right. So here's what I think we're going to do. We are going to go for another 10 or 15 minutes, I think. And we're going to do one more rundown. We're going to cover, for those of you just joining us, and there's been more coming in. So for those of you just joining us, we're going to talk about the really extraordinary events of tonight. We're going to take any sort of final questions. If you had a question and we missed it, make sure you at me, and that makes it much easier for me to see here on the back end, and I will try to get to it. We're also going to just sort of double check the news and see if there has or has not been anything big. I think we're kind of, I'll talk about what our strategy is going to be, but I think we're going to wind it down after that. So we're going to do a wrap up, and then I'm going to talk about where we're going to go from here. So, once again, if you have any questions, super chats, anything like that, would appreciate it. And by the way, I've said this before, said it again before we do our final rundown of the night. If you like the show, aside from, like, subscribe, join us on the Discord. We are going to be following this on the Discord, and I'm going to be asleep, but there's always somebody on the Discord posting. So come on in, join us. You can follow it there. Immensely proud, as always. We beat mainstream media to this, and I think that's one of the things you get when you follow In Time you don't get anywhere else. We are immensely proud of that. So I hope you will like, subscribe, and share. Go send this out and say, hey, I follow a channel that was on this before anybody in the mainstream media. Share those links and let people know. And then they can also be informed early too. And works for everybody. So if you like the content, please share. Where are we? About bigly, I am bigly proud. I am bigly proud. Native Atheist, $10. Thanks, Nick. You are most welcome. Thank you, Native Atheist. Your support has always been delightful. It's always delightful to find you in other live chats. We hang in the same circles, but thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. So, about 7 hours ago, I gotta go back and time change. Wow. 7 hours ago. We got word that, let me rephrase that to be more accurate. We got word that 7 hours ago, protests started erupting in Israel. What about? Well, as the protests have been for the last 6 months, it was about Benjamin Netanyahu's massive power grab in Israel. He has been trying to amass power, eliminate anyone in government who can oppose him, even the Supreme Court. And he has been trying to eliminate and or reduce the power of the Supreme Court for some time. He started in earnest when the Supreme Court blocked one of his nominees for a cabinet position that would have consolidated his power even more. Most of the people he's been putting in is very similar to how Putin fills his positions. It's people who will do or say anything he tells them to. It's been very tense in Israel for a while, and there have been protests quite regularly, and they've been growing. Last night, Netanyahu fired the last remaining holdout, moderate in his government, the defense minister. Defense minister, thank you. The defense minister, he fired the defense minister. This was seen as somebody who truly represented the people and had the best interests of the people at heart. And when he did that, things exploded. They very quickly got to about 500,000 in the size of the protests, and then we watched literally every hour another 100,000 people spill out into the streets. The last report we have was from about 3 hours ago that they had hit 800,000, but as day breaks on Israel, we believe that they will probably easily get into the millions, which is quite staggering for a country of only 9 million. If this were the U.S., with a population of over 300 million, we would be talking, just at last report, of roughly 25 million people. Imagine 25 million people protesting in the U.S. That is roughly on par with what we have been seeing and our last reports from the area. As soon as this happened, a number of other things happened. The Council for Israel in New York resigned, saying that he would not work for this government. We had notification from, it was conflicting reports as to whether it was their equivalent to, I guess, the Joint Chiefs, or if it was the defense minister, but we believe it was at this point that we believe it was the defense minister calling for all diplomatic staff to resign across the world and say that they would not work for this government. We don't know yet if that has had any result. It's also difficult because we don't know who's asleep and who isn't. In regards to all of these things. We do know, however, that a general strike was called. Hospitals, universities have all said that they will not be operating. They are on strike. All unions have called a strike, meaning that as dawn breaks in Tel Aviv, you have a lot of people with nothing to do but to go out and protest. We've had some unconfirmed reports that the military has been asked to intervene in individual areas and that they have refused to do so. The head of the military has come out and said that they are aware that the government has lost control of the country. There was a call from the opposition party against Netanyahu to remove Netanyahu by any means necessary. This is an implicit threat that if Netanyahu is not removed voluntarily, he should be killed. Coming from the opposition political party, I know politics are tough in the U.S. Oh, so
let me interrupt you for a second,
please.
I want to read something directly from Al Jazeera about this. Please. I know a lot of people don't like Al Jazeera. I actually do. I think they're really
they're one of our. I'm going to interrupt real quick just because Al Jazeera is one. Sometimes I don't like their reporting specifically on the U.S., but we consider them a reliable news source, and they're one of the ones we rely on. Al Jazeera is actually really good.
So, the turmoil comes at a critical moment in the passage of the legislation of a bill giving the executive more control over the appointment of judges. It is expected to be brought for ratification this week in the Knesset, where Netanyahu and his allies control 64 out of 120 seats. So very narrow majority. Coalition government again. Anyway, continuing. Netanyahu and his allies say the plan, which also seeks to grant Parliament the authority to overturn Supreme Court decisions, will restore a balance between the judicial and executive branches and rein in what they being the Likud, see as an interventionist court with liberal sympathies. Critics say the laws will remove Israel's system of checks and balances and will concentrate power in the hands of the governing coalition. They also say that Netanyahu, who is currently on trial for corruption charges, has a conflict of interest in this matter. Quote, what the government wants to do is not to correct or fix or amend the judicial system so that it will be more just. Exactly the opposite. They wish to take control over the judicial system, said Ofer Kassif, an Israeli politician and Knesset member for the left Hadash party. So I think that encapsulates what's really going on here in a lot of ways. We have a authoritarian, corrupt authoritarian leader who knows he's in trouble and is trying to find a way to rig the entire governmental system to ensure that he is not held to account and never will be.
And we had discussed earlier, so he's likely to be convicted on corruption charges, and he had attempted to put in a law that said that corruption is not necessarily going grounds for expelling a prime minister. Oh, so yeah, I think you're right. I think he's got a lot of self-serving motives there.
Yeah, the one that really, which I wasn't aware of until I just now read that article. The one that really triggered me was when it said it grants the majority coalition the ability to overturn Supreme Court decisions. You're corrupt. No, I'm not. My buddies all think I'm not. We're going to take more money and make everybody rich in our party. You know, it's a complete and total endorsement for corruption is what it is when you really get down to it. So somebody just asked the question, how long do you think it will be before the Israeli military needs to respond, restore order in Israel, and get the country going again?
Good question.
I think there's a important question that needs to be asked. Should they? I understand that everybody wants to see the chaos disappear, but if the government, or excuse me, the military acts, they're basically acting on behalf of a corrupt authoritarian government. So the military would not be restoring order. They would be, in some sense, preserving the chaos so that the corrupt government can continue to do whatever it wants. So yeah, it's a real trade-off. I don't see the government moving to support the crowd, the protesters, the mob, whatever you want to call it. And that's the issue, is that there's nobody really leading that protest movement. And that is what's needed, is somebody who's in, kind of heading that up and saying, we now need the military to act to save the country so that we can, restore order, revise the Constitution, eliminate this corruption, and have leadership that we can once again trust and have faith in. And until somebody emerges at that level, I don't think military intervention is a good idea, from my perspective anyway, because what you're doing is solidifying the control of Netanyahu. Or you're putting in place a tradition where when the military doesn't like what's going on, they can simply remove civilian authority, and you end up with a Central American banana republic, coup after coup after coup. Every time a new president gets elected, his buddies and or rivals stage a coup and overthrow him and create a new president. And a couple months later, they do it again and again and again. I think we don't want Israel to descend into that kind of chaos.
Is that why we have posse comitatus in the U.S.?
Yeah. I think in large part that's what a major part of that is, that you have to distinctly separate defense from law enforcement, from internal security, whatever you want, because when they become the same entity, it doesn't just encourage, it actually creates the necessary foundation for an authoritarian state.
All right, makes sense. We had a question too. How could a hospital go on strike? My assumption is that, and I mean, it's clear the hospitals have said they're on strike, and I forget what the terminology was that I saw, but my assumption is it's all non-essential services. So I'm assuming the ERs are open. I certainly hope they are. Anything that's non-essential. I mean, I hope people are getting dialysis and stuff like that, but I honestly don't know. I don't know what it means. Joe, well, good to see you, Joe. I always love seeing Joe. Joe is joining us, so welcome to the nightmare. It's been a long day, Joe. It's been a long day. Long couple of hours at least. I had one final question, and then I spaced it, and then I think we're going to wrap up. So obviously, this is going to be continuing for a long time, and I am tempted to cover it. We've covered things easily for I think the longest we've done was about 14 or 18 hours. I'm happy to do it if we can provide some service for that. At this point, I'm not convinced we can, and the reason is because hopefully mainstream news is starting to take over. Reuters has this and is now going with it. We've done the best we can to make sure you're informed as to what's going on. Obviously, this is an extraordinary situation that has the potential to reshape how we look at major swaths of the world, depending on how this pans out. So, for all intents and purposes, at present, there has been a collapse of the Israeli government, and we'll see how that shakes out. I do have one or two other quick things I'm going to want to check on before we go, but I'm not sure that streaming for another 4 or 5 hours. If I was anticipating something big in that time, would stay on. I'm not. Join us on the Discord, and you can keep up with all of this. Other people will be posting it. And if something truly extraordinary happens, we will be back. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and share, and we'll stay on it. But, while this is an active situation, it's one that I'm not expecting a resolution to in the period of time that we could reasonably cover. We'll just be ending up doing a rundown for the next 4 hours until, or 4 or 8 hours until something happens. So, at this point, I don't think there's necessarily a reason to continue much longer. Yeah, I hope that they lose power too. So let me just see. There was one. Okay, yeah, we do have 2 things I want to hit quickly. We've been talking about the Trump rally. I did want to mention about the Trump rally. So I'm sorry, I had done something I shouldn't have done, which was I talked about the size of the audience without the picture of it, because you need the picture to get the context. So I've got a picture of the Trump rally. It was huge. There were, in fact, a lot of people there. We have a picture of the audience. This is the Trump rally held earlier today. Very large audience, very engaged.
I think that's my neighbor over there.
It looks like it, but I think they're all. I'm glad the dolls aren't anatomically correct. Is all I have to say. Yep, that's the audience. All right. All right. So I do want to check on one last minute thing. Do you have any last thoughts before we go, Commander?
Nope. Don't think so. Be interesting to see where this goes.
There was a question about Mossad and what they're doing now. The only thing I know of is that we do know that there was a meeting between him and we're learning now about a meeting between Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces. But there was also a meeting. Well, there was a meeting between him, the Israeli Defense Forces, and intelligence. And then what we've learned about that meeting is his own intelligence said that basically the country would collapse if he did not resign. And he was told this shortly after the firing, or before, actually. I'm sorry. I don't know the timeline, and that's probably important, so I don't know. But it wasn't. It was before 800,000 people took to the streets. So, and before the resignations, before the shutdown of all services across the country. So, he had warning that this was likely going to happen. And but I don't know, would Mossad get involved in any meaningful way?
I don't think Mossad really has a huge internal security mission. I don't think it's within their purview. I'm sure that they, look at the situation and advise him. And, if there was like a credible threat that somebody was going to try to assassinate him or something, they might act. But against protests, particularly large protests like this, I don't think they're going to want to do anything. They're going to say, yeah, you want to stop the protest? Resign, asshole.
So, and we also know Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house has been overrun. There were barricades that were overrun. His house is, everybody guarding it has abandoned their positions. His family was removed, and the house has been seized by protesters. We're looking at, again, at last number was 800,000. We expect it to go easily over 1 million. Even 800,000, if this was the U.S., that would be 25 million Americans marching in the streets, just to give you an idea. Hold on. So Prime Minister so we have this out of Israeli News Now, I think it is. Benjamin Netanyahu says that failing... hold on one second. Apologize. Let's see. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned the calls for the Israeli Defense Force to stand down by the public poses a severe threat to the future of the state of Israel, and could spread beyond those who oppose the government's judicial overhaul. Well, that suggests to me that he has in fact ordered them, and they've refused. At least something, not necessarily something huge, and maybe he hasn't said, wipe them all out, but, you had said earlier maybe he had ordered pockets to defend or something, and they've refused to do that. Well, how do you take that?
Yeah, that sounds like a man who's getting scared, honestly. It's, I ordered units to turn out and try to break up the mob, and they're not doing so, or at least significant numbers of them aren't doing so. And for you to try to argue that they should is problematic. It seems almost contradictory in some ways. I don't know what.
Well, and he's not going out. He's not arguing against them. He's arguing around the people who are, which would be, by the way, wouldn't that be the defense minister?
Yeah, exactly. That's the guy who should be in charge, and he's the one he fired. And his replacement appointee is a former head of. I'd have to check my notes here. The guy who's replacing him. Former head of Shin Bet.
And so now, because the defense minister has said that the Israeli military should not engage against the people of Israel, that makes the defense minister a national threat to Israel in the eyes of Netanyahu.
Yep.
Which is grounds to arrest him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it appears he's setting up the groundwork for his next move is to eliminate his opposition. And yeah, if that's the case, the real question boils down to, will Shin Bet and or Mossad obey his orders to eliminate his political opponents?
And his political opponents have already said Netanyahu needs to be. He's the threat to the state of Israel, and he needs to be removed at all costs. So basically, both
sides are saying the other side needs to go now.
Yep. All right. So it looks like each side is essentially calling for the violent removal of the other side. Yep. Now, again, this may look like a civil war, but Netanyahu's side is 50 people. That's a little bit, but I mean, compared to.
Yeah, it's not tiny. The thing to me, though, that stands out is when the membership of his own party are such that he is relieving them of their jobs, their assignments, and it's difficult to understand unless you live in a parliamentary system. When you do something like tell the head of the transportation department or the military or whatever that they're fired, it's a party upheaval as much as anything, because those people have their own factions within that party, and they can now call for those factions to stop supporting him. They splinter, and you get sub-parties off of Likud. And so he might even end up losing his majority if that came to pass.
Well, thank God for small favors.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to quickly check once again the live chat, and I think, yeah.
And I'm going to have to roll. I've got.
Yeah, I know it's getting late for you.
I've got appointments tomorrow, so I need to be.
Yes,
sir. And chipper for that.
All right. Well, we've got. I think we're about wrapping up. You can certainly bail right now if you'd like. I'm going to be on 2 more minutes. I think. I thank you very much for joining us, and we do have on Tuesday, and this is actually apropos of what's going on, anyways. We do have on Tuesday members from inside the resistance against the Iranian regime. They are actively fighting the Iranian regime from inside Iran. We will be talking with one of them on Tuesday. That will be at 2 p.m. Eastern. The reason for that time is that's the only time that they could make it. So we'll be doing that. I know you've got a busy week, so that's quite possible that you won't make it, but I wanted to let our audience know. I think that's going to be a very good show. I'm proud of the fact that we were able to get this guy and talk to him. I've already spoken to him at length, and he has some extraordinary stories to tell. So we will be having him on Tuesday. On Thursday, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm assuming that you will be unavailable. If so, we may have on *𝐸𝐻𝑎NDering for a downtime. We also have one or two other shows we may end up putting in there. The schedules is we've got some things going on. Friday,
Thursday, of course, I'm fairly confident I'll be here for. Friday, I'm not so sure.
Oh, marvelous. All right. Well, on Friday, we're going to have on Operator Starsky. We also are doing a thing. It's a Godless Granny is, if you're on Twitter much, and if you're in some of the circles that I'm in, you know who she is. She has made a quilt of the Ukrainian flag. And we are going to be having a charity stream, and the highest super chat is going to get the flag, and all super chats will be going to it's a UN organization. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's a UN organization that explicitly works with refugees, and we will be donating to help this organization specifically deal with Ukrainian refugees. We'll be talking about that more on the Discord. For those of you who are interested, we're also we've reached out to several other channels, and they've agreed to help. And so I'm hoping it's going to be a really nice stream, a long stream. I'm hoping we're going to get some pretty good guests for that, and it's going to go to a good cause. So that will be coming up. So barring that, if you're just joining us, it really is the end of the show. There is a huge number of things going on in Israel, but I think you're going to have to go back, and we do the rundown about every 15 minutes to every half hour. You'll find a rundown. Not much has changed. Israel is is in the process of undergoing some serious changes. Join us on the Discord to keep up with that. Please like, subscribe, and again, share this content with other people if you like it. We're certainly very proud of it. And if something extraordinary happens that is either not being covered by mainstream media or being covered, in our view, inappropriately, you will see us back live. But barring that, look forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday. Have a good night, all. Thank you, Commander.
Take care.